Welcome back. Well, this morning was the Snuggies segment where we got to be all curled up on the couch with our favorite morning beverage and enjoy the hashtag Comeback California conference. This afternoon, we got to get to work, okay? Now, I got some good news. Hashtag Comeback California is actually beginning to trend on Twitter. Yay, you guys are doing a great job. The fun of this, though, is because some of the folks that watch hashtags get viral are not our fellow travelers in the world, but they're actually helping our hashtag travel because they're like, what the heck? Why is this hashtag? What is this even all about? And you can tell who they are. So they're actually helping us. They're giving us a little boost. But this afternoon, I was almost going to say, you can't say, actually, we saved the best for last. What you can say is this afternoon just gets better and builds on all of the momentum that we've had all morning with great speakers from Dennis Prager, Heidi St. John, some candidates for political office. Well, this afternoon we've got some real treats. Some folks that don't quite get out that often that are here with us right now. So, hope your thumbs are all rested up. Hope you're ready to start tweeting because there's a lot that's going to be coming at you. We need to get that stuff out on Twitter so our fellow travelers on the other side of the aisle can have something to start questioning. All right, excited about this because I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of people that are packing up and leaving California. And I'm thinking, why? Why are you leaving California? Because this stuff is just going to follow you. If we don't stop it here, guess what? It goes everywhere. So fine, you can take off to go to Nashville. You can take off to go to Maine. But it's just going to come there sooner or later. Well, our next speaker has nailed it with her talk called California is Patient Zero of Radical Leftist Ideology. She is Liz Wheeler. She is a best-selling author and a political commentator. You know her if you've followed conservative media, and if you want to keep following her, you can keep following her at joinlizwheeler.com. She's going to talk about Patient Zero for the radical leftist ideology here on hashtag Comeback California. So snap some pictures, get them out on the internet, tweet some of her lines. Let's get some people out of the stands and onto the playing field. We'll see you in a bit.
Thank you so much. And by the way, I'm actually fine if you want to say saving the best for last. I'm not going to turn down a compliment. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you for being here. My name is Liz Wheeler. I'm the author of the best-selling book, Tipping Points: How to Topple the Left's House of Cards. Thank you so much to Pastor Jack Hibbs, the community here at Calvary Chino Hills, and thank you to you for having me here today. I'm going to start out tonight by getting right to the point. Did you guys hear about California's new health education framework? This is going to be taught to students, kindergarten through 12th grade, in public schools in the state of California. Have you heard about this? This is new in the last year. The California Board of Education introduced this last summer. And I want to give you a brief overview of what exactly this is. In the summer of 2019, the California State Board of Education introduced a new framework for sex education in public schools in our state. Under this framework, children in kindergarten, so how old is that, 4 or 5 years old? Under this framework, in kindergarten, teachers are encouraged to talk to your 5-year-old child about gender identity and transgenderism, just to make sure that your kindergartner knows that she can be a boy if she wants to be a boy. Under the guidelines of this new framework, in public schools all across the state, in middle school, teachers will be talking to your 11-year-old about masturbation, telling your preteen that masturbation is perfectly healthy, perfectly normal, perfectly okay. Fast forward to junior high and high school, teachers are encouraged to teach your teenager from a book called SEX, the All You Need to Know Sexuality Guide to Get You Through Your Teens and 20s. This book gives descriptions about anal sex and about bondage. Now, any functioning adult with the barest basic knowledge of biology knows that the safest safe sex practice to avoid pregnancies and STIs is abstinence, right? Well, the new California Board of Education framework to teach kids about safe sex teaches them that safe sex does not mean abstaining from sexual activity until you're married. This framework teaches that safe sex means it's okay to do oral sex or anal sex or any sexual behavior that cannot get you pregnant. That is what the state defines as safe. Furthermore, this California state framework encourages teachers to talk to your teenager about LGBTQ relationships and teaches them about puberty, not from a scientific or a biological standpoint, but in a way that, quote, creates an environment that challenges binary concepts of gender. And here's the kicker. For the most part, parents have no power to opt out of this radical leftist indoctrination, this explicit, this graphic sex ed. Technically, parents can opt out of the sex education part, but parents cannot opt out of the material that teaches about gender, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. So it is a technicality. And the justification for this extreme and graphic sex ed being fed to your kids in public schools, the director of curriculum frameworks and instructional resources at the California Department of Education, her name is Stephanie Gregson, she says, and I quote, "I think that people hear the word transgender or gender identity in guidance for kindergarten through grade 3, and they think the worst. It's really about civil rights issues," end quote. My question is, since when is sexual bondage, which is going to be taught to your child in a public school, a civil rights issue? Make no mistake, this radical sex ed framework is not about education, it's not about biology. It's just plain old indoctrination. It's brainwashing your children to advance a far leftist political agenda. And the scariest part of all, this is not an isolated incident. This is the strategy of the radical left. Our fundamental, our inherent, our constitutional rights, our constitutionally protected rights are on the chopping block in this nation. And radical leftist Democrats are using social issues in politics to chip away at our freedoms because they know that social issues are topics that make people uncomfortable to discuss. This afternoon, we are going to talk about why we as Christians and as conservatives must read the radical leftist writing on the wall, especially when it comes to these uncomfortable social issues in our nation. So what does this mean? Well, as a child, I read a book where it was a mystery book, a children's mystery book, where the mastermind, who was a thief, he hid the spoils of his caper. It was an envelope, I think, that contained the secret to where the lost uncle was. He hid the information about the whereabouts of this lost person by hanging the envelope in plain sight on the wall of the office in the house. He didn't disguise it. He didn't camouflage it. He put it in a picture frame and he displayed it right there where everyone could see it. But nobody found it. The detectives, the kids who were solving the mystery eventually did, of course, in the last chapter of the book. But before that, they tossed the house. They searched everywhere, every nook and cranny. Half of the book took place in that office. But the good guys did not see that envelope hanging right in front of their faces because they didn't expect it to be right in front of their faces. They expected it to be hidden or camouflaged. This is what the radical left does. They nail their envelope to the wall right in front of our faces, and we conservatives and Christians, we still try to convince ourselves to ignore that writing on the wall. The truth is, the way the left hides their agenda isn't actually by hiding it. They hide it by the reckless and shameless audacity with which they push to control us under our very noses without hiding it. So we can see what the left wants America to look like if we simply look at what they're doing. You'll remember a couple of years ago when a certain presidential candidate who was worshipped by the left promised or threatened, depending on which side of the aisle you're on, to fundamentally transform America. Did we conservatives think he meant it? Did we take him at his word? Did we think that he didn't do everything in his power, and some things decidedly outside his power as chief executive, to make that fundamental change happen? We conservatives and Christians must hit the mute button on Democrats' rhetoric, on their TV commercials, their social media ads, their campaign talking points, the pundits on television, and look at what the left is doing under our noses. Actions speak louder than words. And so this afternoon, we're going to start right here in the state of California, since nowhere is the agenda of the radical left more blatantly visible than in our state. So we started with the graphic sex ed, teaching transgenderism to kindergartners. Well, just last week, the governor of our state of California, Gavin Newsom, signed Senate Bill 145 into law. Have you heard of Senate Bill 145? This is now a new law in our state that reduces the criminal penalties for pedophilia. You wouldn't think that would be a tenable political position, would you? Yet the Democrats in this state passed it in the Assembly and in the Senate, and the governor signed it into law. Under this new law, if an adult has anal or oral sex with a minor who is within 10 years of age of that adult predator, the predator does not automatically have to register as a sex offender anymore. That penalty has now been downgraded. It's now just up to the discretion of a judge. So listen to this scenario. If a 24-year-old man has anal sex with a 14-year-old boy, that's a crime, by the way. In the state of California, that is illegal. And the 24-year-old does not have to register as a sex offender automatically anymore. It's now just left up to the discretion of the judge, thanks to Governor Newsom and the Democrats in the state of California. Who, by the way, the Democrats in the state of California claim that this new law protects LGBTQ youth. And I got to tell you, I don't get that argument unless Democrats in the state of California are trying to portray LGBTQ adults as sex predators. Because this new law, make no mistake, puts children at risk, especially young boys. It normalizes pedophilia, and the Democrats know this. This is not the only social, sexual issue in the state of California that the Democrats have tried to swing to the radical left. Thanks to the former governor of this state, Jerry Brown, and his band of loony liberals at the time, it is no longer a felony in the state of California to transmit HIV to another person. Under the provisions of this law, it was Senate Bill 239, you can knowingly donate contaminated blood with HIV, and it's not a felony. You can knowingly transmit HIV during unprotected sex, and it's not a felony, even if the other person is not aware of the risk of contracting HIV before intercourse. Even for intentionally or maliciously transmitting a virus that could ruin their lives, if not cost them their lives entirely, liberals in California reduced the penalty to a mere slap on the wrist, a misdemeanor. You know what else is a misdemeanor? Trying to sell margarine in Iowa and calling it real butter. Democrats in the state of California have now made the two an equitable offense. California Democrats, these three examples that I'm giving you right now, California Democrats are trying to erase the consequences of sexual promiscuity. You want another notch on your bedpost, they say? Well, let me give you a high five. You won't suffer any repercussions, they tell you. Of course, we know this is statistically and scientifically false. This is, however, a particularly interesting and critical part of the Democrats' strategy to undermine traditional marriage and the nuclear family unit in our country. They do this on purpose, and not out of tolerance for so-called alternative lifestyles. No. There's a very simple and dangerous reason the radical left is intent on destroying the scientific fact, first and foremost, that there are two genders. It goes as such. If we erase the idea of biological gender, then by nature, no pun intended, that erases traditional gender roles in our culture. That also erases traditional relationships, doesn't it? If we dissolve traditional relationships between men and women, what does that break? That breaks down marriage. If we attack marriage, that destroys the family structure. If we lose our family unit in this nation, people will be forced to resort to relying on the government instead of relying on their families or their communities for everything, for emotional support, for education, financial assistance, moral guidance, God, friends, everything from A to Z. All of that allegiance will be given to the government because there will be no family unit to guide it. And what happens when everyone is reliant, wholly dependent really on the government? Well, first of all, 1984 happens, plus the liberal politicians who have been advocating for these radical leftist agenda items all over the country, but specifically here in California, who forced this cultural suicide on us in the first place, are now in a position of absolute power and absolute control over our lives. And the benefit to them is they also grow very, very rich. That's the first part. The social, sexual issues that are uncomfortable to talk about. Nobody wants to stand up at a podium and talk about anal and oral sex, believe me. But it has to be done because the Democrats understand that it's uncomfortable and difficult to talk about, and they're using it, they're weaponizing it against us. The second social issue, the second set of social issues the Democrats target is education. Education. UC Berkeley, part of the University of California education system, declared last year that the statement, and this is the statement, quote, "The most qualified person should get the job." That seems like a no-brainer, right? Common sense. UC Berkeley declared that statement to be a racist microaggression. Why? Got me. Again, unless they're trying to suggest that people of other races are less capable, which is inherently racist, immoral, and evil to suggest, who knows what they could possibly mean. That kind of radical leftist ideology has been pervasive in our university systems across our nation for years now. But in our elementary schools and our high schools, it's getting just as bad. Again, back to the California public school system. The state of California introduced what they called an ethnic studies curriculum last year in the state of California. This is how they describe it, and I quote, "The interdisciplinary study of race, ethnicity, and indigeneity with the emphasis on experiences of people of color in the United States." Okay, that sounds harmless, that sounds fine, right? Just a second. In the document, underneath the description, guess what they're actually teaching your child in school? This document is filled with words like misogynoir. Does anyone know what that means? Positionalities, hybridities. Capitalism is described in this document, this ethnic studies curriculum. Capitalism is described as a form of power and oppression. Capitalism is described as such next to the patriarchy and racism, white supremacy and ableism. The California state bureaucrats, elected and unelected officials, want to teach your child that capitalism is equitable to white supremacy. Capitalism then, further down in this curriculum, capitalism and capitalists are portrayed as villains in this document. Teachers, according to this ethnic studies framework, are encouraged to have their students read biographies of people like Angela Davis and Assata Shakur. Assata Shakur is a convicted cop killer. She shot a New Jersey state trooper in cold blood. She was convicted of murder, sentenced to prison. She escaped prison and left for Cuba, communist Cuba, where she cowardly hides to this very day. The state of California wants teachers to encourage your children to read her biography. This curriculum finally encourages students to become, quote, agents of change, to become social justice organizers and advocates, and to plan direct action, marches, boycotts, strikes, and sit-ins. Does this sound like education to you? Does this sound like teaching our children the facts and the opinion on both sides? Does this sound like unbiased, nonpartisan education? Of course it doesn't. It is biased, it is partisan, it is ideologically far to the left. And the California State Democrats want to make sure that your children have to experience this indoctrination, that they are required to. They want to essentially ban homeschooling. In early 2018, a Democratic Assemblywoman in the state of California by the name of Susan Eggman introduced a bill targeting homeschooling families. It was AB 2926, for those who want to read it themselves. Under the provisions of this bill and its companion bill, AB 2756, Government officials would be permitted to snoop on families who homeschool under the guise, wait for it, of fire safety. Now, Eggman's cronies claimed that this bill would help prevent child abuse, too. This is a favorite tactic of the left. It's completely false. This is what they do, though. They co-opt and they exploit tragedy. They use people's feelings in order to shove through their liberal agenda. In this particular case, the left was playing off of the arrest of the Turpins, a couple in California who had egregiously horrifying abuse of their 13 children whom they hid from the public by claiming to homeschool the kids. In fact, the rate of abuse inflicted on children who attend public school statistically is higher than the rate of abuse of that of homeschooled children. You can look it up. The studies have been done. The point, though, is that the purpose of this anti-homeschooling bill and its companion bill was obvious. The left did not disguise the fact that they were trying to make it as difficult as possible, if not completely impossible, for parents to choose to homeschool their children. Home visits, can you imagine? Inspections of the home? Imagine a government agent showing up to your door unannounced, a provision that was allowed in the companion bill, AB 2756, snooping around your home and ordering you to show credentials to prove that you're a certified teacher if you want to homeschool your children. By the way, private school teachers in the state of California are not required to be certified, just so that we all understand the context here. There's also no statistical proof that children taught by uncertified teachers fare any worse academically than children taught by certified teachers. So, I don't need to tell you that the purpose of the credentialing provision is simple: to eliminate as many parents as possible from being eligible to homeschool their children. California Democrats, as you can see, think that they know better than parents. They want to prohibit parents from making decisions that the parents deem best for their children. Why? Because the California State Democrats want as many children as possible to be indoctrinated in their public schools. Now, fortunately, and many of you watching tonight, or this afternoon, I should say, may have been part of this. Fortunately, homeschooling families in the state of California rebelled against this insane attack on parental rights, and the unannounced fire safety check was stripped from AB 2756. I wish I could say the same about the other bill. As you can see, the attacks on freedom and liberty by Democrats in the state of California are like a tsunami. Another day, another individual liberty fed to the snarling, burgeoning big government monster. And here's the thing: Democrats never hid their agenda for 1 second. Instead, they tried to turn it on us and they told us that they're fighting for our rights. But are they? Do their actions show us that they're increasing protections on our liberty and our security, or that they are working to violate and wreck our rights? Read the writing on the wall, you decide. So we have social sexual issues, we have education indoctrination, and then we have religious liberty. That's the third prong of how Democrats in California target social issues. In 2015, the California State Assembly and then the California State Senate passed a piece of legislation they called the California Reproductive Fact Act. Have you guys heard of it? This bill required pro-life crisis pregnancy centers in the state of California to post advertisements for free abortions on the wall of their establishment. In other words, the California State Democrats were compelling speech by private citizens, even if that speech violated the very fundamental religious beliefs and doctrine held by the people running these crisis pregnancy centers. Under penalty of criminal prosecution, the proprietors of pro-life pregnancy centers were forced to choose between violating their conscience or violating the law. Outrageous is a tame word to describe the tyrannical behavior of the state doing this, forcing primarily religious, because that's who it is, primarily religious pro-life crisis pregnancy centers to use their enterprise as an advertising platform to promote a procedure to which they're not only morally opposed, but their business mission is dedicated to ending. California Democrats, in other words, the lesson here, California Democrats are totally fine with government compelling speech by private citizens. They don't think pro-lifers should be allowed to be vocally pro-life. They want you to be legally prohibited from doing that, from living your values in the public square, running your business, donating your time and your money. Instead, the left believes pro-life people should be forced to advertise the radical leftist abortion agenda. Now, fortunately, again, the outcry from the right and from justice-minded people caused the Supreme Court to rule that that law likely violates the First Amendment right to free speech of the pro-life crisis pregnancy centers. The Supreme Court reversed the ruling of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2018 and sent the case back to the lower court. Even Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote a concurring opinion on this case, in addition to Clarence Thomas's majority opinion, in which he absolutely lambasted the state of California. Kennedy called the law an example of the serious threat presented when government seeks to impose its message in the place of individual speech, thought, and expression. Kennedy specifically chastised the leftist lawmakers who had voted in favor of the law. He said, "It is not forward-thinking to force individuals to be an instrument for fostering public adherence to an ideological point of view they find unacceptable." End quote. That was Justice Kennedy who said that. And then the Democratic Attorney General of the state of California, Xavier Becerra, he called the Supreme Court's ruling unfortunate. 1 year before that, in October of 2017, again, this is back when the governor was Jerry Brown, who was called Moonbeam for a reason, he signed into law a piece of legislation that allows the government, the California state government, to throw nurses in jail if they misgender their geriatric patients. This doesn't sound like a real law, does it? This is what it says. This law states that nurses are required to address their patients as Z and Zer, that is spelled Z-E and Z-I-R, if so requested by their elderly patients. And there's no provision in this bill exempting Christian nursing homes, nor are there protections for Christian nurses who abide by the traditional Christian belief and scientific reality that there are only two biological genders. If a nurse caring for an elderly patient knows that the patient wants to be called by an invented pronoun and refuses to do so, that nurse can be thrown in jail by California government agents. By the way, this is the same state that allows you to change your gender on your license or on your driver's license without any actual legal standards that you must meet in order to claim that you have transitioned genders. The California State Democrats, as you can see, do not care about the separation of church and state. They want everybody, regardless of their religious beliefs, to live according to their church of liberal orthodoxy, and if you don't, they want to toss you in prison. That's not hyperbolic, you just heard the law for yourself. Then we have freedom of the press. I don't have to tell you the story of Kamala Harris, now vice presidential running mate of Joe Biden, who is also a senator. At the time, she was the Attorney General of the state of California. She targeted an investigative journalist, my friend David Daleiden, who exposed Planned Parenthood for their illegal aborted baby body parts harvesting scheme. They sold the parts of aborted babies for profit. Kamala Harris, while she was Attorney General, raided Daleiden's apartment, not Planned Parenthood, the lawbreakers, Daleiden's apartment, confiscated his laptop. Daleiden was charged with crimes, felonies, even though it was Planned Parenthood who had committed at least 2 crimes, which they admit on videotaped testimony, and they got off scot-free. The 2 crimes, by the way, just so we're very clear, altering the abortion procedure to procure intact body parts from these babies is illegal, and committing illegal partial birth abortions is obviously illegal, both of which Planned Parenthood officials admitted to under oath on videotaped testimony. Then we have the sovereignty of the state, the sovereignty of our nation, the United States of America. In May of 2018, the California State Senate introduced a bill wanting to allow illegal immigrants to serve in state government. Ingest that for a moment. Allow foreign nationals to serve in our government, to make laws that we, the citizens of the United States, are required to follow. The California State Democrats tried to pass such a bill. Fortunately, that bill did not become law, but read the writing on the wall. What did their actions show us? This is what they want for our nation. Thank goodness this next bill also died in the California State Capitol, but again, we should not ignore it because it shows the true agenda of the radical left. The bill, Senate Bill 974, would have allowed illegal immigrants to sign up for Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal is California's version of Medicaid, which, by the way, was originally intended for children in poverty, disabled persons, and pregnant women. Contrary to these original intentions, even while poverty rates in our nation have gone way down, the number of enrollees in Medicaid has skyrocketed. Keep in mind, Medi-Cal, the California version, is close to free as well. The bill being pushed by Democrats in California essentially then wanted to provide foreign nationals, illegal immigrants, free health care subsidized by you. And we're not talking about free emergency care. Nobody is opposed to that. No one is opposed to providing emergency care to people who need it, regardless of immigration status. We are talking free, comprehensive health care. Think of the word comprehensive as defined by President Obama during Obamacare. We're talking all-encompassing, maternity coverage for men, substance abuse counseling for people who aren't addicted to drugs, comprehensive, everything. This provision would have allowed illegal aliens to get transgender surgery for free on the taxpayer dime in the state of California. Meanwhile, by the way, a growing number of doctors and providers in California won't accept Medi-Cal patients because the reimbursement rate from the state is so pathetic. It's bad for their business to take Medi-Cal patients. So instead of fixing that problem for the citizens of the state so that they can have better access to health care if they need it, liberals in California are dumping a whole new demographic of people, illegal immigrants, into the program. And guess who pays for this? Well, of course you do. And I do. Anybody who has a job, anybody who pays taxes. We are now paying for the health care of foreign nationals who illegally came into our country and are here still illegally. This is important because Democrats in California think they have a right to take our money, the fruits of our labor, and give it to somebody else just because they want to, just because they legislate it. They think they have the authority to take a portion of your paycheck every week and give it to somebody who broke the law, reward them for breaking the law. They think they have a right to force you to pay for gender-bending, puberty-suppressing hormones and genital mutilation surgery for the illegal alien next door who hopped the border fence. This is what the California Democrats tried to do. They tried to make this a law in our state. They aren't hiding it. The more radical the notion, the harder the Democrats seem to work to try to codify it into law. In fact, sometimes the agenda of the left is so radical and so insane, it's hard to believe that it's actually real. Good thing we have proof in all these bills. You can look them up for yourself. So let's take a minute and circle back to my analogy from the beginning of the envelope hiding in plain sight on the wall. For the past 20 minutes, do you see it? Do you see it staring right at us in front of our faces, taunting us, as if to say, don't you believe that I'm real? Don't you believe that I'm actually here? Of course, the Democrats try to sow a seed of doubt in our minds. They tell us that we are not seeing what we are seeing. They're masters of diversion in a sense, almost like a pickpocket magician. Listen to me tell you that I'm not stealing your wallet while my hand slides into your pocket and takes the money right out of your pocket. See, I didn't take your wallet, just your money. That's what they tell us. But you and I, we can see what Democrats want for America. If we stop listening to their diversionary words, stop letting their sleight of hand fool us, and instead start looking at their actions. They do not hide their agenda. And their agenda is not moderate. It is not common sense. It is not compassionate. It's radical. And it's laser focused on social issues, because social issues are uncomfortable to talk about. We've just seen this for ourselves in the state of California. Here's the thing, this is very important. This is not just isolated to California. Much of the leftist big government insanity in our nation starts in California politics. The California state capitol is the breeding ground, the petri dish wherein the radical leftist orthodoxy festers. You can think of California actually as patient zero, the first person infected with the plague, who infects 10 more people, who infect 10 more people, who infect 10 more people, et cetera, until the pervasive illness, we'll call it radical leftism, is rampant, sweeping our nation, leaving strewn in its path victims formerly known as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Make no mistake, what happens first in California is soon pushed into the furthest corners of our nation. Even a small Midwestern town that right now feels safe from the intrusion of big government will not be immune to this. These policies are disseminated from California many times by radical leftist politicians who began their careers, even if they now serve at the federal level, they began their careers in the state of California. Speaker Nancy Pelosi is the first one who comes to mind. She called the $1,000 bonuses and Trump tax breaks for the middle class crumbs. It probably is crumbs to her. She voted against the partial birth abortion ban. Nancy Pelosi voted against allowing the 10 Commandments to be displayed in public schools. She is undercredited, by the way, for her significant role in convincing Barack Obama to pass Obamacare. Nancy Pelosi is the former chair of the California Democratic Party, and of course now the current Speaker of the House of Representatives. Kamala Harris, too, came from California. She was the California Attorney General. Her team, as I mentioned, raided the apartment of investigative journalist David Daleiden after he exposed Planned Parenthood's illegal aborted baby body parts chop shot. Coincidentally, though, this is the point that needs to be made, during her campaign for the United States Senate, Harris had a tab on her campaign website where people could donate to Planned Parenthood. It's funny, huh? I'm sure the relationship is not significant to Harris targeting Daleiden for exposing Planned Parenthood's criminal activity instead of prosecuting Planned Parenthood for breaking the law, as was her duty to do as chief law enforcement officer in this state. Not only is Harris the former Attorney General of California, she was also a district attorney in San Francisco, a bastion of law and order if I've ever seen one. And now she wants to serve in the highest office of the land as Vice President of the United States. We also have the far-left politicos who found a safe haven in California after they served in the Obama administration, like former Obama Secretary of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano. She is now in charge of the entire state-funded University of California school system. And get this, the California State Assembly hired Mr. Contempt of Congress himself. Former Obama Attorney General Eric Holder was hired by California Democrats to help them craft a legal strategy to fight the Trump administration. Your tax dollars, ladies and gentlemen. This is how our elected representatives are spending their time and our money. Again, I'm going to repeat this until the cows come home. The left does not hide their true agenda. We conservatives are often just too skeptical to believe it. We're quick to accept their words or their denials, and we forget to look at what they're doing. We give them the benefit of the doubt. We ignore their actions, the policies that they push, the legislation they introduce, the regulations they mandate. The left lies with their words, but if you look at their actions, you can see for yourself what they want America to look like. They want America to look like California, the government of California. At this very moment, California is a snapshot of the Orwellian dystopia our country's hurtling towards if we do not nip the radical leftist ideology in the bud. Now, liberals are going to scoff when they listen to this. I'm sure my Twitter feed is already flooded. Liberals will scoff at the accusations and accuse us conservatives of exaggerating and indulging in the slippery slope fallacy. But let me just tell you, sit at the top of a snowy hill on a sled, see what happens. You slide down. Make no mistake, that's what's happening in our country. So what does this mean for us as conservatives and as Christians in our nation today? It means that we conservatives, especially Christians, are called to speak out on these social issues, on the sexual social issues, on education, on religious freedom. It is our duty to defend biblical principles, not because we want our constitutional republic to be a theocracy. We don't, believe me. I'm not here to try to use the power of the government to force you evangelicals to attend Catholic Mass with me. But it is critically important to understand that the left is weaponizing social issues to undermine our fundamental rights because they don't believe that we conservatives and Christians will fight back. This has been happening for decades in our country, actually. This is not new. Every generation since the oldest people in this room became adults, every generation has faced a battle on social political issues. The 1960s, it was the sexual revolution, birth control, free love, promiscuity. The 1970s was abortion. The 1980s was divorce, the breakdown of the family. The 1990s was online pornography. The 2000s, the hookup culture at colleges. 2010, gay marriage. And now we see the transgender ideology, graphic sex ed, parental rights, homeschooling, all on the chopping block. We're told, too, that this is just about liberation or libertarianism, that we should let other people do what they want to do. And legally, that's true. But culturally, it's a lie. We can see for ourselves that the left is weaponizing these issues not out of tolerance, not to increase freedoms, but to restrict the rights of people, Christians and conservatives, whose ideology they do not like. The left attacks the bedrock values of our nation, religion, family, and education, and they do this to render people dependent on government instead of God by replacing parents and spouses with bureaucrats and frameworks and curriculums. They render our next generation compliant by indoctrinating children in public schools with warped leftist agenda items taught by the same government bureaucrats positioning themselves to be obeyed instead of God, to replace the support of families with government regulations and government assistance. Remember, the more that people are dependent on government, the more dependent on government that people are, the more power the government holds over our lives. That is the ultimate goal of the left. We can see the writing on the wall. We can see the truth in front of our face. The question that we all have to ask ourselves is this: what will we do when we see the truth? Thank you. You can follow me on Twitter at Liz_Wheeler. Join me on YouTube at joinlizwheeler.com. Thank you all so much for having me today. It was a pleasure to speak to you, and God bless you all.
Have you ever thought about doing voter registration drives at your church? It's legal. All you have to do is reach out to your church leadership and ask if you can do a voter registration drive, if you can hand out Christian voter guides, if you can collect ballots at church. It's easy to do, and we'd love to help you get started. Reach out to us at Calvary Chapel Chino Hills or visit our website, realimpact.us.
On your mic. On your mic.
Turn the mic on every darn time. All right, you guys. You went and did it, didn't you? You got the hashtag Comeback California to trend, and now guess what? You stirred up a beehive of activity on Twitter. Let me give you an example. Now's a good time as any to remind Christian Americans that the separation of church and state is a thing. And faith has no place in American politics. Unbelievable. Well, believe it, because it actually lives on Twitter. It's something that somebody put out in response to the astonishment that hashtag Comeback California is trending. So great job, keep it up. Now, one of the things that I heard Liz mention that I was really glad that she did, because we had a great speaker earlier that is an advocate for homeschooling. Liz mentioned the Turpin case. Of course, that's a situation that happened in Riverside County where a family used a homeschool filing to keep their kids out of school, not be checked up on, and used that as an opportunity to keep their kids like chained up to their beds. I mean, the abuse was horrible. Well, the Never Let a Crisis Go to Waste Democrats brought in a bill that she outlined, and Jose Medina brought that forward to regulate homeschools. Now, I bring that up because the rest of the story is absolutely famous. Because the largest outpouring of citizens in the state of California to the Capitol happened as a result of that. Yes, homeschoolers wielded their political power. The sergeant-at-arms at Sacramento at the state capitol, they were overwhelmed. 3,000 people showed up to that testimony and to testify against that bill regulating homeschools. So if you don't think homeschoolers have political clout, they do, because they're the ones that got that bill pulled back and that section about regulating homeschools removed. All right, we continue this afternoon with our next speaker. I've gotten to know Karen England of the California Capital Resource Institute over the last couple of years, and they do phenomenal jobs of tracking the bills that go through California's legislature. She's also done an amazing job of bringing the whole sex ed curriculum to the forefront. In fact, she really led the charge. She's here to talk to us about taking California back from your kitchen table. Can you really do that from a kitchen table? I don't know about you, but I'm anxious to hear about that. Remember, hashtag California, hashtag Comeback California. Tweet about it. Take some of the pearls that she's sharing about activism and get them out into the Twitterverse. So let's keep stirring it up over there on Twitter. All right, without further ado, Karen England.
Well, thank you, Dawn. And has this not been a great conference? I wish that I could be out there listening, and I can't wait to get back home and be able to watch this all over again. I loved Heidi St. John and the information she shared. And a lot of what has been shared by the speakers earlier, I'm going to share with you as well. And if you haven't gotten the picture, this is an uphill battle that we're fighting here in California. The forces that are working in Sacramento, that are working in our school boards, they are well-funded, they are organized, and they are very committed to the cause of destruction on our children. And we need to wake up, we need to get busy, and we need to start taking back the land that we've given them. These are our kids that were given to us. It's their heart, soul, and minds. This is not an easy thing to have to fight for. So I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about California schools, and I know you've heard a lot about what's going on in the schools already. We're going to talk about California schools. We're going to talk about the laws. I'm going to explain it a little differently than what you've heard today. And then I'm going to talk about how easy it is to take California back from your kitchen table. It has never been easier to be an activist than this time during COVID. You know, when I first started out, they didn't have the internet. So I would have to go down to Sacramento and ask for a box load of bills and have to go through them one at a time until I got through all 3,000 pieces of legislation that were introduced during the year. It is so easy for you to participate in your government, easier than ever before, and especially with COVID, because now they're having to take testimony via telephone. So we'll talk about that and how to take it back from your kitchen table. So here we are, our kids start school, we're all excited, you know, we couldn't wait. We think back about, you know, when it was, when we were in school, and I used to love to go to back to school shopping and having a shopping list, and our kids were so idealistic about it. And then a few years later, we find out, and we're seeing this all over the TV now, they're nothing but activists. This is a school in Indiana. All these students are not in class because they're busy being activists. And you've heard a lot about the Black Lives Matter and the movement. You're seeing it on TV, and then you've heard a lot about it today. What's happening now is that the cover is being taken off. This has been going on in our schools for quite some time. It's just now coming out in the forefront. This logo is from a couple of years ago in a school. And we've got the whole Black Lives Matter. This is a North Carolina school district. This is a teacher training that they send the kids through, that they send the teachers through. And it says, step 1, recognize your white privilege. Step 2, learn the do's and don'ts of being an ally, meaning an ally to the repressed people. And step 3, recruit more members and learn steps 1 and 2. These are the trainings our teachers are going to. This is North Carolina, not San Francisco. This was actually from 2 years ago. We've got this young gal, she's 16, and I kind of highlighted the important part here where it says, after George Floyd's death, she teamed up with some of her best friends, all teenage girls who met in AP government classes, to organize the Black Lives Matter march in the Republican-leaning Cincinnati suburb of Mason, Ohio. This is going on in all of our school districts. And I know that I'm talking about California, but California is not like Las Vegas. What happens here does not stay here. and it's not. It is spreading throughout. And I'm actually thankful for COVID. It's been an opportunity for parents to really look at what's going on in our classrooms, really look at what our teachers and the teachers union's motivation is. That has been a very good thing. And parents are seeing maybe their kids don't need to be in the classroom with 4 walls 6.5 hours a day to actually learn. Oceanside Unified School District. Again, I mentioned how we have, this has been going on for quite some time. Oceanside, where it's a military town, supposed to be conservative. Their teachers have started the Culturally Proficient Educator Committee to talk about Black Lives Matter. They started this 2 years ago. This is not new. They have been training their teachers in how to indoctrinate our kids for years. It's just we're finding out about it now. Here we are. This was, I think everyone saw, it was pretty controversial when a lot of the kids were walking out during the guns, for gun violence after Parkland. And it was interesting because there was a teacher up in Rockland, California, who just made mention of, maybe we should care about the preborn. And what if we all walked out of class based on the preborn? They were calling for her head at her job. She couldn't say one thing, but here we've got teachers who are actively, politically indoctrinating our children, using our taxpayer dollars to do it, and we're allowing it to happen. So I have a question. Liz was talking earlier about being able to see what the left is doing. They are very obvious about it. I don't know why we don't believe them. I believe it was Maya Angelou that said, when someone tells you who they are, you need to believe them. So I'm saying to you, parents, grandparents, citizens, do you believe the leftists when they tell you who they are and what they want to do? Here's something that just this 2 years ago, SECUS, which is the big sex education pushers, they literally came out and said what we've all known for years. But they did a press release to say, sex ed is a vehicle for social change. Think about that. It's not about keeping our kids healthy. It's not about STIs, STDs. They specifically, the #1 organization on sex ed says, sex ed is a vehicle for social change. They went on in their press release to say, we promise you, you will never hear us say SECUS without also saying sex ed for social change. Do we want to believe them? What more is it going to take? So here's something that I came across in preparing for this talk. And I never really understood how sex education and social justice went together, but I found a workshop that teachers are going to in California. And once again, this is the ongoing training that they're getting. And you'll look at the last paragraph, and it says, participants will be able to develop strategies that engage young people in advancing social justice in the sexuality education classroom. Now, I'm going to say something that's somewhat controversial. I don't think it should be, and maybe to this audience it isn't. But parents, you're not only the first educator of your children when it comes to sex education, you should be the only educators of your children in sex education. The government has no business teaching sex education. You need to take that power back. It does not belong to the government, and they should not be teaching it at all. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the California laws, and you've heard a lot, and people are throwing out terminology. I want to share with you, before I do kind of this little civics lesson, that it was in the last year that my mom sent me, thank you, Mom, all of my old report cards. And I noticed that I had an A in choir, which I have no idea how that could ever happen, but I had a D- in civic government. Now, I'm standing here today giving you a civics lesson, and it's not because I'm anything special. I'm sharing it because it's how God worked in my life, and that if I can do this as a homeschool mom and get active, you can do it. My first start was reading a newspaper article 25 years ago in Rockland, California, which has been in the news a lot the last few years. And I was reading about the religious right and how she was going to ruin the school district. I was a new believer. I'd been saved a couple of years beforehand. We were new in town, and I thought, wow, I should probably go see who this religious right extremist is that's going to ruin public education. I started thinking, my husband had been with Campus Crusade for Christ. I didn't find any of those people that ruin public schools. So I went down to a school board meeting. Walk in, the union's handing out stickers. I said, no, I don't want a sticker. I don't even really know what I'm doing here. And as I sat there and listened to the school board meeting, this is 25 years ago, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm that extremist that the newspaper is just calling crazy, because I actually am teaching our kids to wait until marriage. Everything I thought I was going to see, this horned woman, ruining everybody's lives, and I sat there going, oh my gosh, I'm it. I need a t-shirt that says, I am the religious right. But I'd been so intimidated into thinking, oh, it's something bad. I have no problem owning that stuff now. It's important that we stand up for what we believe. Ronald Reagan said it, if not now, when? If not you, who? Who's going to do this? We have Planned Parenthood. We have Equality California. Who represents the family? Who's going to stand up for the family? And that's what I do at Capital Resource Institute. So I'm going to talk about how a bill becomes a law, just to give you a little bit of basics and to show that this is like extra credit to up my grade from a D-. So it starts out, thank you for laughing, it starts out as an idea. So all of these different bills were somebody's brilliant idea, and they decided in Sacramento, oh wow, we need this new law that we haven't lived with for all these years. All of a sudden, we need it. Not only do we need it, but to the tune of about 3,000 bills a year. So they introduce bills, and that's what it's called. And you hear those numbers like AB, SB 145, AB 2218. Just so you know, that AB means it was an assembly bill, meaning an assemblyman introduced it, and AB 2218 would be the 2,218th bill that legislative session that was introduced. Somehow we lived without all those laws the year before, but now all of a sudden we need thousands and thousands of regulations on us. So they'll introduce a bill, they then will debate a bill in committee. All of the assembly bills will happen in the assembly, the Senate bills in the Senate, goes through the process, they flip houses, it continues, and then it goes to the governor's desk. This all starts around January, February. We just finished the legislative session, and several are sitting on the governor's desk. That means all of you who have been home due to COVID have had plenty of time, if you wanted to find out about these bills and to weigh in on them, to contact your legislators. I loved that Senator Melendez mentioned that there are a lot of cowards up in Sacramento. And I have to tell you, there are. And it's not just in one party. I can't tell you how many pro-family candidates will literally not vote on something and abstain. We send them to Sacramento to do one thing, vote. And they abstain because it's too controversial. SB 145, legislators abstained. Senator Melendez was one of a handful of legislators that spoke out at all against it. Everybody else wants to cower because they don't want to be called an extremist. How are we going to persuade the other side of our position being right if we're not standing up and talking about why we believe SB 145 was wrong? So the bills go through the process. They then end up on the governor's desk, which is where a lot of bills are now. And just to kind of give you, you've heard a lot on the sex education. There we go with, and feel free, we've got a lot of this up on our website, capitalresource.org, to learn the process. But let's talk about how AB 329 started out. So it's an idea, and obviously a very bad idea, but it was sponsored by Planned Parenthood and Equality California. It was also sponsored by the California PTA. You know, the parent group that's supposed to represent parents. So they came up with this idea. Do you think Planned Parenthood's goal was to ensure our kids' heart, minds, and souls were protected? Was Planned Parenthood's goal in writing this legislation to ensure our kids don't get STIs or STDs? Equality California, the pro-LGBTQ community, why are they involved in sex education at all? Why is this their number one bill and a priority? If you're still sending your kids to sex ed and not opting them out, there is a problem because you are throwing your kids to the wolves. So that's who sponsored it. They came up with the brilliant idea. They went to Shirley Weber. She introduced it. Now, I've listed out, and it's going to take 3 slides to show you this, but everybody that supported it. So keep in mind, as the bill is going through committees in the process, AB 329, it then went over to the Senate and started the process over again, and people debated it and talked about it. Here are all the people that supported it. Again, California PTA. Check out this one, the CTA, Oakland Unified. Now we have this one. Do you see all the Planned Parenthoods that supported it? Did Planned Parenthood support this bill because they care about our kids? Do they donate to those candidates because they care about our kids? They don't even know the names of my kids. I know they don't care about them. What I really want to show you and encourage you to get off the couch and into the field is this. At the end of all of that, AB 329, here are the 3 groups that opposed it. I don't share this because I want people to feel bad, or I want you to join with us. I want that list to be long. I want it to be more than just Capital Resource Institute, Faith and Public Policy, which is now Real Impact, and California Right to Life. Why are there not churches listed and individuals listed? Why? The language of the bill was very, very clear. It says you must affirm all sexual orientations. You must teach all gender. It's not some confusing bill that it takes a lawyer to be able to read. I often say I'm not a lawyer, I just play one at work. This stuff is not rocket science. And we don't have many rocket scientists up there either. It's a little bit sad, but often we are the ones that know more about the pieces of legislation than the legislators who are voting on it. And we need to take our freedom seriously, that they come with a responsibility. And it really does. The whole purpose of the committee process and for there to be time to hear the bill is specifically for the public, not the lobbyists, the public to weigh in on an issue. Now, how many of you consider yourself lobbyists out there? And raise your hand for those of you, there's a few people in the audience. How many of you have ever lobbied before? Okay, a few of you are saying yes. Everyone's hand should shoot up. We lobby every day. And if you've heard me speak before, you hear the story about how I'm always lobbying my husband for a new outfit. Every time I get a speaking gig, he's like, oh, wow, does this mean a new outfit? And I'm usually like, yeah, it does. So, although this one isn't new, I just want to clarify in case he's watching, I still have a free shopping pass. So we all lobby. Our kids lobbyists, they want to stay up a little bit later and watch America's Got Talent. Sometimes we negotiate with them. Sometimes we say yes, sometimes we say no. We all lobby for different things all the time. We need to take the mystery and that the kind of, it's like a frightening word, I think, lobby. Actually, I think it's kind of a dirty word. I have to register as a lobbyist, and I hate that. but we do it all the time. And for those of you that remember when Mervyn's was around, this really hit me. I've got a 30-year-old daughter, and when she was about 8, we were at Mervyn's, and I was picking up shirts and saying, Jordan, what about this? What about this? And you know, they go through that phase where it's all neutrals and, you know, tan and black, and that's all they wear. And I'm like, oh, you should get this orange and this yellow. And she just looked at me over the rounder and said, Mom, stop lobbying me. And I was like, whoa. You're right, that's what I was doing. I was trying to convince you of my position on the clothing you should wear. We lobby all the time. Why aren't we lobbying for the things we believe in that are much more important than the color of a shirt? Why aren't we doing it? We've got the left teaching our kids how to do it. We need to take some responsibility for ourselves and learn how to do this and advocate for the things we believe in. And we need to have more than 3 organizations saying, no, not with my kids. This is embarrassing. This was just in 2015. Where are the churches? Where are the parents? So now we're going into 2020 and the recent laws. And I want to talk a little bit about, you've heard a lot on SB 145. So I'm not going to cover that. Again, that's a Senate Bill 145, which means it was the 145th bill introduced this year. We have 3 more that are sitting on the governor's desk that Capital Resource Institute is tracking. And one of them is 331, AB 331, which mandates that ethnic studies for graduation. Currently, school districts can have ethnic studies. It's not mandatory for graduation. The state wants to mandate that. And I think you've heard enough on this throughout today, but it's nothing but pushing the ideology of Black Lives Matter into schools. And the thing with this ethnic studies, charter schools are supposed to be free of the red tape. This mandates, just like AB 329 did, mandates charter schools. So the freedom that people felt they were going to have in charter school no longer have it. We talked about, I heard some speakers earlier, 2218. This is sitting on the governor's desk. Again, go to our website. We exist so you don't have to do all of this research. This is what we do. We research the bills, we send out action alerts. AB 2218, for some reason they thought this was really important this year. The same day that AB 2218 was passed, saying we are going to give away, the first version of the bill said $15 million, then they took out the amount so it could be greater than $15 million of taxpayer money to organizations for sex changes. So that's our money. Are we okay with that? Our tax dollars? It was the same day, one of the votes was the same day that the president came out and talked about the deal he was going to give for unemployment, and I think it was you had to match, every state had to match $200. Can't remember the exact amount, but Jerry Brown, Newsom came out and he said, we don't have the money to do that. I was like, well, then how do we have money to give $15 million if we can't help the unemployed that you've shut down because of COVID, but we can throw it away to organizations like Planned Parenthood who have now gotten into the business of sex hormones? The other bill, SB 132, that is sitting on the governor's desk, and this is mixing sexes in prison. So if you're a biological male, but you believe you're a female, you get to go to the female prison. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a bad gig for a male prisoner. And you're going to compel speech because every prison guard has to refer to you as that gender. The whole he, she will be considered a hate crime. That's sitting on the governor's desk. But things you didn't hear about because COVID happened, so they had to prioritize what they were going to do. These bills I'm going to talk about would have flown through and would be sitting on the governor's desk if they weren't signed. So I tell you this because you need to know this is what they're going to come back with. This is what they're thinking. Again, believe them when they tell you who they are. They are not hiding it. So, AB 2035, it will be called something different next year, but this required social workers to inform every foster youth that is 10 years of age or older their right to an abortion and other reproductive health care. That's what they think is a priority in the state of California. That's what they think is a priority for social workers. That they go in and tell every 10-year-old, you have the right to go get an abortion and you need to know that. 10-year-olds. Age of consent is 18, although we played around with that with some others. I loved this one. People literally don't believe this. AB 2826, this was erasing gender. This literally said that any store with 500 employees or more cannot separate toys, clothing, it went on books, by gender. So at Walmart, you can't have the little boys section and the little girls section of clothing. They would make that illegal in the state of California for any business that had 500 employees or more. They did it for toys, games, clothing, etc. And you can go Google it. They were defending it the whole time. Then COVID hit, so they had to prioritize. Another one, SB 1004. This is one in California. Sadly, a minor can exercise her right to a confidential medical services. But this bill said when they do that, we're going to mandate the insurance company pay for it and keep the information from the parents. The parents cannot find out that we charged their insurance company for it. This will be coming back. And then if it's not enough, this usually comes every year, SB 1153, and that's mandatory kindergarten. Because some of us might actually be holding our kids out and teaching them at home. They want to force them into the public school system. So we've covered the bills that have passed. This information is on our website. So I want to talk about taking California back from your kitchen table. It has never been easier with the internet than to get active. I love this quote from Bonhoeffer. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. We have not been acting for a long time. We need to get busy. One thing you can do, share. You need to go home, share that you were at this, email every single person you know. The videos are going to be live. You can just share, share, share. My first experience with a piece of legislation, I had gone to the Capitol for like a citizen lobby day. I didn't know what I was doing. We actually went and it was with Concerned Women for America, and they talked about these bills, and then they said, okay, now come up and take this packet of information and go lobby your legislator on this. My girlfriend and I, we went and we took the packet, and like when we left the room, we dumped it in the trash and went home. It was like, no, I can't go talk to a legislator. I mean, I don't even know, I got a D-. I didn't even know I had gotten a D- in government. How can I go talk to a legislator? I'm a homeschool mom with my cloth bag, denim skirt. It never really dawned on me that I could go do this. The next year, I was putting on Citizen Lobby Days. Again, it's not because of me. It's what God does with those of us that will step up and are called to something. That same day, someone was telling me about a bill, and I'll never forget it. It was by Leroy Green. You can look it up, and it was called the Parents Report Card. Again, keep in mind, I'm still somewhat of a new Christian, and I'm thinking, parent report card, what? They're going to grade the parents? This cannot be true. I went down to at the time, again, we didn't have internet, so I went down to the basement of the Capitol. I asked for that bill number, they gave it to me, and I read it and I understood it. And yes, it said, Teachers were going to go in and make sure kids had ample places to study, check in on the kids in their home. This was 25 years ago. I couldn't believe it. And I remember thinking, I've just got to go tell people. I know more people agree with me on this than on the other side. And I still believe that. I still believe that. The answer isn't to retreat, it's to join those of us who are on the battlefield. We need you. We want you joining us in this battle. So share information. There's flyers. You can go on Facebook. Dawn was talking about all the different Twitter handles. Share the information you have learned. Do not keep it to yourself. Don't assume that your friends and family know this information. They don't. Here's something that you can find on our website, and you can also find it at Real Impact. For those of you that don't believe what's going on in sex education, here's a great flyer that all of you should have in your purse. And whether you're at Bible study, at a soccer game, start talking to parents about it. You know what's great about this? On the back, it shows every single person that voted for it and every single person that voted against it. You need to know who those people are. I love this piece. This you can find, and I put it up there at Real Impact US. This is directly from the platforms of the parties. And you can see there where it talks about, it's a little bit to the left, but on the public school restrooms. One party believes that you will work to guarantee transgender students access to facilities based on their gender identity. Do you know when they say you can't discriminate against transgender, it means a boy who thinks he's a girl gets access to the girls' restroom, overnight trips. The 8th grade science trip is no longer girls in one room, boys in another. All you have to do in the state of California is assert that you believe you're the other biology, and you are granted access. If we as believers aren't going to stand up and protect our daughters and granddaughters at the bathroom door, who is going to do it? This is a great piece. If you've got family members that believe one thing about a party, use this. This is what they say they believe. We need to believe them. They're hiding in plain sight. The other thing you can do is keep educating yourself. Now, you've heard from a lot of speakers today. Many of them have podcasts. You're going to hear from Charlie Kirk later, others. You need to be subscribing to the podcast. You need to be, when you're cooking dinner, putting your phone up and listening to a podcast. Those of us that it was really hard for me to cancel Netflix, but I did. I have a love-hate relationship with the whole boycotting things. I'm reminded of my hypocrisy a lot from my husband when I go to Starbucks. But then I swear I'm boycotting again until like the next week or two. So it took me a few days, but I canceled the Netflix. Instead of watching the Netflix, I can be listening to a podcast and educating myself. It has never been easier. Everything is at our fingertips. Our organization, Capital Resource Institute, you should go there right now, sign up for our email lists. We do the work so you don't have to. We will show you how to call a legislator. We put on trainings to teach citizens how to be activists. We've been doing it for 31 years. I want more of you to join us. Go to our website now, sign up for our emails, capitalresource.org. In addition to that, right now a big window will pop out that says 2020 Voter Guide. And you can sign up to get the voter guide. You'll get our other emails as well. But the important thing about the voter guide, we are the only organization that has a 501c3 compliant voter guide. Oops, I don't know how to go back. Oh, wow, I know how to go back. Okay, we are the only ones that have that. And what I mean by 501c3 compliant is that it's suitable for churches. There are certain things, guidelines that you have to follow when you're a church. And for instance, you can't have just a single issue, like you can't have a voter guide on just guns or on just life. You have to have a multitude of issues. And we worked with Alliance Defending Freedom on our questions, had to rewrite some of them, but we sent out candidate questionnaires to every single senator running, every single assembly member that's running, and every single congressional candidate. And right now we are just at the last stages of following up with those candidates, and we asked them questions, and they were point blank. Do you support or oppose this? Do you support or oppose this? You can be an informed voter. We'll do the work for you, but you need to be getting this voter guide. You need to be going back and talking to your pastor and talking to your soccer team and talking to your Bible study and saying, I'm going to order these. We need to know where these people stand. We need to be hold them accountable for how they vote on things. We at Capital Resource Institute, we do the work so you don't have to. I love being called to this. There's I just gave a few other resources, but Real Impact, great information. I mean, they're putting on this conference today. I work very closely with the team here at Calvary Chapel. There's a few groups there that do federal issues. So if you want to get some white papers on some of these issues, you can go to them. But what's the next step? I would love to see the phone lines during COVID. They're not letting people in to testify at the Capitol, so you have to call up on a phone line. You should be able to do that. No one has to see you. They aren't going to know who you are. You can call up and say, I'm so-and-so, and I oppose AB 2218. How hard is that? The other side is doing it. Do we care as much about our kids as they care about indoctrinating our kids? Right now is the perfect opportunity to contact candidates and elected officials. Ask them questions. The other night I was having dinner with someone down here, and she mentioned that there was a group of moms, something was going on at the local school, so the moms came up with their own questionnaire and just sent it to the school board candidates. How awesome is that? Again, they're not going to distribute in a church. They don't have to worry about what the question was or how it's answered. Why aren't we doing that? These people are saying, I want to represent you. Okay, well, I want to know what you believe and how you're going to represent me. Now is a perfect time to start contacting those candidates and saying, you want my vote? Okay, let's talk about what you believe, what I believe. Host a coffee. Host a coffee and show this video of this conference or a couple of the speakers that you really enjoyed. Have a pizza and politics a Sunday afternoon after church, and then just invite friends over to start talking about the issues, to share the party platform, to share the infographic on sex ed. If we aren't going to share this information, it does no good. The voter guide, I mentioned this. You need to be talking to your pastor starting tomorrow about getting voter guides and having them in the churches starting the day that the ballots go out. First week in October, we will have the voter guide ready. On our website, you will be able to type in your zip code and pull up the voter guide of the candidates that you've got. Register voters. How many of you have volunteered to register voters at your church? How many of you have signed up here with the Real Impact team to help them register voters? Donate. I know Seth mentioned this. You need to donate your time and your money to the organizations that are representing you. An organization like Capital Resource Institute, you saw what we're up against, Planned Parenthood, Equality California. We can't do the research, we can't do the voter guide, we can't do any of this without donations. That's just the reality of how it is. And the more we get, the more we can do. And it was a generous donor that allowed us to do the voter guides. Last but not least, you need to share, share, share. And that goes way beyond just sharing once on Facebook, but it's taking advantage of the technology that we have. Sending an email out to friends and family. taking the voter guide and letting them know this stuff exists out there. Some of the most important things like this infographic. Every person should be getting this from our website and sending it to every resident citizen in California saying, hey, do you know what they're teaching our kids? Do you know that it prohibits the teaching of abstinence only? Where were we? Why aren't we letting people know? That's the state of the law. So share, share, share. And I'm going to leave you with this, and those of you that have heard me at Calvary Chapel before, it's a William Wilberforce quote, and I guess I do want to leave you feeling guilty if you're not doing anything, but it says, you may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say you did not know. There is no way you could have watched this conference today and not have been convinced that we have a problem and that we need to wake up and take on the battlefield and restore our values, our voices in the community square. So thank you and God bless you.
Did you know there's an effort to recall Gavin Newsom in California? You can join in by visiting the website, recallgavin2020.com. There you can print the petition, sign it, fill it out completely, and mail it in to the address at the bottom of the petition. Don't hesitate. The deadline is coming soon, and we need every signature. And if you need help, don't hesitate to call us at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills.
Well, hey, that was awesome. I love the advice that Karen England had. Share, share, share. So let me give you my Venmo account number so that you can share a little with me. No, I'm just kidding. Really and truly, we are in an environment that rewards political entrepreneurism. So if you find a niche, you can fill it. There's really a vacuum out there of what I refer to as political activism. It rewards political entrepreneurism. So great ideas, host a coffee. Who doesn't? Well, some people don't like coffee, but you can have a lot of it. Have people over. One of the other ideas that I gave to some folks, and they actually did it, and they had a great time doing it, put a pop-up at the end of your driveway as people are walking by on Saturday morning, have some coffee and donuts, and just hand out stuff about the propositions. There are so many different things you can do, and you can literally start a movement with some of those things. Speaking of starting a movement, every Thursday night, we have an in-depth look at the issues and the propositions that are going to be on the ballot. The propositions, there's 12 of them, issues relating to everything from the things we've been talking about today to faith. Every Thursday night, Town Hall Central. So if you want to get plugged into that, here's what you do. There's a short code that you text to. So it's 40691. 40691. Text the word freedom to that short code, 40691. You'll get back an opportunity to sign up for the Town Hall Central email list, and we'll keep you in the loop on all of our activities coming up to the election. Oh, but we don't stop there, because taking back California, making a comeback for California, isn't about what we're doing between now and the end of the election. The work continues after the election, and we'll continue to do that. So that's a great way to get plugged into another resource. Our next guest, Charlie Kirk. He's becoming a household name, and it seems like he's everywhere. Well, except for here. Charlie's schedule is so busy that he actually had to pre-tape his section with us. It's a special message specifically for this conference. We must win. Now, for those of you that might not be familiar with Charlie Kirk, who is on the news all the time, he's got podcasts going everywhere, he's got thousands of chapters at schools and now at high schools all across the country. Charlie Kirk is the founder and president of Turning Point USA. That's a national student movement dedicated to empowering young people to promote the principles of free markets and limited government. Can't think of a better thing to promote. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA joins us on #ComebackCalifornia.
Hey, everybody. So honored to be with you today. I'm so sorry. I did everything I possibly could to be with you and one of my heroes and dear friends, Pastor Jack Hibbs, who's just doing such an amazing job to save our country. But I'm still trying to solve the two places at once dilemma. I have been crisscrossing the country. We were just in North Carolina for a packed event to help get our president reelected. Before that, we were in Arizona. Where else were we? I'm having a Joe Biden moment right now. We were in Florida. We were in Virginia. We were in Wisconsin. We were in Minnesota. We were all over the country through Turning Point Action, our 501c4 organization. We are knocking on tens of thousands of doors for our president. We are making amazing amounts of phone calls and a huge impact on the ground to help get our president reelected. I just want to say hello and thank you to all of you that have been supporting us. And I just love going to Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. Jack, you are an American hero. You are a dear friend. You have always had my back. And that last live stream that we did a couple months ago has been seen millions and millions of times. And we have shown it on our Charlie Kirk Show podcast. We have cut clips from it. And we can trace now dozens of people, if not hundreds of people, have given their life to Christ because of that live stream. So God bless you, Jack, for really giving us that platform and for allowing us to discuss these very important issues. Look, I want to talk to you guys today about this election. I truly believe that my entire life has been leading up to this moment. I really believe that the next couple weeks are the most important weeks that I will ever live in my lifetime, and definitely the most that I have ever lived to date. We have an opportunity. It is not just an election. It's not. We have dark forces that want to take over our government at the very highest level. And you can see in California what happens when these people get power. SB 145. Does that mean something to you? It should. SB 145, recently signed into law by Gavin Newsom, by the way, recall Gavin Newsom, is a bill that decriminalizes and normalizes pedophilia in the state of California. If you guys were following this bill, it was first introduced as a radical bill in the state assembly, and now it's been signed into law by Gavin Newsom. The Los Angeles Times tries to qualify it, and it says it gets rid of discrepancies against LGBT people. That's not what it is at all. What it is decriminalizing pedophiles so that judges now have the opportunity to not have pedophiles be listed in the sex registry, sex offensive registry, so that you can look up who the sex offenders are in your local neighborhood. Why is it that in California, they are going out of their way to try to pander to the pedophile lobby? This is what happens when we lose elections. And for Christians out there, this is the wake-up call on wake-up calls. Look what happened with Netflix and their new series, Cuties. It's hard to even talk about some of this stuff. But elections have consequences, everybody. If we abdicate our role to express truth and fight for truth and contest truth, this is what happens. So I'm traveling the country and I'm talking to many different people about what's happening. I can tell you this, that there are some very positive trends and there are some things that really worry me. The positive trends is that people, especially in the middle part of this country, are getting increasingly worried that the chaos and the arson and the looting in America is not just out of control, but it could be their house next. President Trump is benefiting from this politically. I am getting worried, however. I am worried about mail-in ballot fraud, which is why every single person listening to this, as an action step, please be a poll watcher and an election judge, please. It is so incredibly important. It is an action step right today of one way that you can help preserve fair and free elections. I'm also worried that the Democrats are going to try to take this to levels we've never seen before. You can already see how they are getting increasingly worried that the president is gaining momentum and tightening this election. It's really more than an election, though. I mean, we can call it an election. It is the most important decision our country must make since 1860. Are we a nation that is thankful that we live in America, or are we angry that we live in America? Are we a nation where we want to say we want to make our kids love America again? Or are we a nation that we want to embrace critical race theory and the 1619 Project? A small side note on that. You know, when I was with Pastor Jack and we had that amazing live stream at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, we were talking about how the president was soon going to make an announcement about educating our children properly in patriotic education. I am pleased to announce today that just 2 days ago, at the airing of this right here as I'm talking to you, the president had a special summit saying that critical race theory, the 1619 Project, is no longer in the federal government, and we are going to have the 1776 Commission. I'm honored to say that I played a role, Pastor Jack played a role in helping spread the message. This is monumental, where Joe Biden and his Democrat allies, they want to embrace this falsehood that America was somehow founded in 1619, when in reality it was in 1776. This is so important that we teach the values of American exceptionalism, of free enterprise, of individual liberty, of strong churches, of rights coming from God, not from government. These are things I talk about every single day on my podcast and when I travel the country. And this is really the kind of question that we must pose our country and pose to ourselves is, do we want to have a country where you are unable to communicate the values that you hold to the next generation? The country right now is going through an inflection point. Our ability or our inability to communicate our founding values to young people will be the deciding factor as to whether or not our republic will continue to exist. We've been given a gift by living in this country, everybody. This gift was bled over. This gift was sacrificed for. This gift of a free society is such a small window of human history. We are now seeing bitter, almost insurrectionist forces that want to tear it down from within. All it takes for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing. And that's why all of you are here today. That's why I wish I could be there, but I'm actually speaking to a couple thousand patriots on the other side of the country, soon to travel to another 4 states in the next 3 days. And so we're all doing our part today. And so the message to continue to communicate is a very important one, is that when we talk about why our country should not get into Democrat leadership, when we talk about what exactly it is that is driving the other side, we need to be very clear about what made our country so exceptional in the first place. Our country was the first country ever to be founded and inspired by the greatest, most important book ever to exist in the history of the world, the Holy Bible. It's not just a book, it is the Word of God. An incredible collection of 66 individual books that come together and harmonizes perfectly and beautifully, where it starts with God breathing us all into existence, and it ends with God having final victory. And we know how the story ends. This kind of incredible picture where God himself came in human flesh and died for our sins. All of that inspired what we are living through right now, which is Western civilization. Western civilization is this idea, this short idea, and I say short in historical terms, in time terms, where it doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what language that you originally spoke. Instead, it matters how you act. It's that idea of e pluribus unum. I know the great Dennis Prager is also speaking today, and he talks about the American Trinity of e pluribus unum, in God we trust, and liberty. If we lose this idea of the American Trinity, we will have lost our country. And so as we dive deeper into this discussion we're having as a country, and really what's happening right now, the education of our children is paramount. This is something that I focus so much of my time on every single day at Turning Point USA, and also politically through our other vehicle, Turning Point Action. We look into the big ideas that have built our country, the ideas of freedom, the ideas of American exceptionalism. How do we communicate those to young people? Are we talking about our founding fathers? And the answer is we're not. And so you could see what's happened in California, where critical race theory has been taught at the very highest level. You can see where critical race theory, which of course, if you guys don't know what critical race theory is, let's take a second to talk about it right now. This has infiltrated so many churches. This is the baseline of BLM Incorporated. This is the idea that is most predominant now in American society. Now, I'm going to say something that is very blunt, but it is true and it is honest. And Pastor Jack said, Charlie, just tell it like it is. I said, okay, Pastor Jack. That's why I love Pastor Jack. And just, by the way, a small shout out also to Pastor Rob McCoy, who is fighting so much right now in Thousand Oaks, California. God bless Pastor Rob McCoy. He's an American hero. We need to continue to have his back. Critical race theory is a racist idea. It was first theorized by Herbert Marcuse from the Frankfurt School. It is an idea that melanin matters, that your skin color actually does matter. Here are the attributes of critical race theory. The first of which is that racism is everywhere, that there is no place in society where racism does not exist, that it's in the air we breathe, it's everywhere. It's a preposterous idea to believe that everything is infected by racism. In fact, I make the argument that America is the least racist country ever to exist in the history of the world. It is incredible that in a multilingual, multi-ethnic, and multicultural country, that we are able to assimilate so many people from all across the world without tearing each other apart. It is the left and the Democrats, through this idea of critical race theory, that are actually trying to tear us apart from within. It's also very important to recognize and realize. So before I get into that, the idea that melanin matters is the first attribute of critical race theory. The second attribute of critical race theory is that there's no individuals, only groups. Now think about it. They don't believe that a black person could believe something different than another black person. They don't believe in the power of the individual. They only believe in the tyranny of groups. This actually explains Joe Biden's remark that if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. That if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Wow. What does that actually mean? He believes that your identity is in believing in one thing. It's monolithic group thinking. It is believing that no way could a black person actually believe in conservative values. For Joe Biden and for the Democrats and for people that believe in critical race theory, they believe that everyone of a certain skin color must believe a certain thing. The third attribute of critical race theory is they believe science, math, reason, scientific inquiry, they are all attributes, they are all weapons of the white supremacist construct. Think about how dangerous this is, to believe that force equals mass time acceleration is somehow a tool of the white supremacist construct. This might sound outrageous, but it's true. You can actually just look at what they believe and how they believe it. Read their literature. This is exactly why the Smithsonian Magazine earlier this summer came out with a statement that said, being on time, speaking correctly, using proper English, and the scientific method are all attributes of whiteness. So things that we consider to be true, math, physics, biology, they reject it. They say instead it's our truth. We are going to have experiential truth. We are going to find the correct way of going about things through sharing of stories and our own personal experience. If you build an entire society just around personal narratives, that country or that civilization will dissolve under its own weight. Secondly, it's very important to the other part of that, which we do not talk about enough, and Herbert Marcuse talked about this in One Dimensional Man, is that if you divide people just based on skin color and on tribalism, then all that matters is power, not any sort of human flourishing or decency or compassion, but power. The fourth attribute of critical race theory is that these are Marxist wishes. This is a Marxist movement designed under the idea of wanting a more racially harmonious society. Do you think race relations are getting better or worse in our country? They're getting worse because of BLM Inc., not because of the president. They are getting worse because of BLM Incorporated, and that is what we should call them, because the term Black Lives Matter is almost a semantic overload. It is a true statement. Yes, all lives matter, Black Lives Matter. But it's also an incantation of a Marxist organization, and it's a Marxist organization. So I want to be very clear, it's BLM Inc. I encourage all of you to also use that sort of branding when talking about that organization, never to be confused with the statement that is, of course, true. But these are Marxists. These are people that want to accomplish a communist socialist takeover in our country. This is their desire. This is just a means to the end. To them, it's all very Machiavellian. What can we do to try to get more power? And the fifth thing that is so important for you to know about critical race theory is they do not believe in dialogue. You see, I think one of the most important issues in our country right now is, are we a country where you can still say what you believe, religiously, politically, or culturally, without losing your job, facing retaliation, or being harmed in one way or the other? This is increasingly being put in question. 71% of young people have said that if they speak their mind politically or religiously, they will lose their job, they'll be kicked out of their social circle, or they'll be bullied on social media, and they are petrified and horrified to speak their mind. This is a bad trajectory for a country and for a civilization. It's bad is not even the right word. It is so beyond dangerous. So they don't want dialogue. They are Marxists. They believe melanin matters. We do not. We as Christians first, Americans second, constitutionalists third, and maybe conservative fourth. We don't believe that skin color matters. This is why the Republican Party, founded as the anti-slavery party in the 1860s, did not care about skin color. Democrats did. Now today, Republicans, we do not care about skin color. Democrats do. Democrats were the party that opposed the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, women's right to vote, and the Civil Rights Act. Republicans were champions of all those things. The Democrats have always been the party of segregation, slavery, KKK, and dividing people by skin color. Republicans have always been the party of equal access, equal rights, civil rights. It's important we get our history correct. And so I want to talk to young people out there really quickly. If there's a young person in this audience, I just want to say, I know it's been a very difficult 6 months. I want to communicate also, not just to young people, but adults that are listening, about the strife of young people. What we did to shut down our country in the last couple of weeks, and the last couple of months, I should say, the last couple months will go down as one of the worst mistakes in American history. Young people right now have suffered a lot of the consequences of these draconian lockdowns. More people have died from suicide, more young people have died of suicide in California than from the Chinese coronavirus. 1 out of 4 young people, according to the Center for Disease Control, have contemplated suicide in the last 90 days. Drug usage, alcoholism, antidepressant medication are all on the way up because we decided to shut down our entire society. We must have an honest kind of course correction here about the damage that we did to young people in our country. So for young people out there, if you feel as if you're working hard and you can't get ahead, I understand that. I sympathize with you. But do not please divulge into victimhood culture. Do not say, I deserve something special because of all these things that got shut down, because of things that are rigged against me. Because as soon as you get into the oppression Olympics, there is no bottom to the misery marathon that will ensue. Instead, say, yes, it is a wrong thing that we shut down the country. In fact, for the adults in the room, please get louder and more vocal about reopening our country because it was a mistake. Instead, for young people out there, if there are things that you're going through that are tough and difficult, first of all, you guys can always email us at our podcast, freedom@charliekirk.com. Again, anyone can email us right now. And in fact, I'm happy to announce for everyone watching, we will give out 50 signed copies of the MAGA Doctrine, my New York Times bestseller. 50 random copies. If you guys email us, freedom@charliekirk.com right now, if you can show us you're subscribed to The Charlie Kirk Show. That's the only caveat. And how do you subscribe to The Charlie Kirk Show? Just type in Charlie Kirk Show to your podcast provider right now, subscribe, and to 50 people that email us at freedom@charliekirk.com, we will give you a signed copy of the MAGA Doctrine. But if you're going through something, please email us because we have helped people wrestle with mental health issues and self-identity issues. Here's just a couple pieces. of applicable advice. Get your goals right. Make your goals sharp and clear. Focus on the good. And understand that if you do something where you can see results every single day, and you do that for a long period of time, or even just a week or 2 weeks, your life will get better. Find one thing in your life that you know is not good for you that you're doing, and stop doing that thing. It could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be spending too much time on your computer, your phone. Everyone knows there is one thing that is holding them back. My challenge to you today, especially young people, find the thing that you know you're not doing and find joy in releasing that thing. In fact, I believe that for most young people in America, in order for them to find success, to find fulfillment, of course, it is found in the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is found in the Bible, but applicably, stop doing the one thing that you know is not good for you. Identify it, drop it with pride, and you'll actually find that your life will get better. I also want to just talk about the landscape of the cultural and civilizational issues in our country. The other part of this, and this is another thing that I overheard somebody say this the other day. I think it was on an airplane or somewhere in an airport, and they said, "Man, I have to go adult today." And I felt myself, a verb, adult. And I thought to myself, this is civilizational ending type stuff. When all of a sudden, adulting is a negative. We have to start, by the way, 52% of young people are living at home. And some of them, I understand, it's because we shut down our country and we made it almost impossible to live independently. For parents out there, please push your young people, push your kids, push your children to bear responsibility early. We have a crisis with young people because we have a crisis of responsibility. I've said this with Jack before, and I'll say it again. The test of responsibility is, if you do not show up to somewhere tomorrow, will somebody have a worse day? If the answer is no, you're not responsible for anything. If the answer is yes, you bear responsibility and you will live a meaningful life. We are on pace to have 500,000 less children next year than this year, according to Bloomberg News and the Hoover Institution. We have more single 30-year-olds than married 30-year-olds. It is long past time that we stop making these disastrous civilizational decisions where we are leaving a generation in debt with no morals, no values, no direction, and just an absolute destroyed country around them. So for the adults out there that are making these public policy decisions, that are on school boards that are saying to shut things down, that are saying we must continue to just stay safe. Heather McDonald says it best. Instead of staying safe, we should stay brave, and stay wise, stay courageous. Because if you're just in a state of staying safe all the time, you can't create a country and you cannot pursue the good. But for the adults out there, I highly encourage you, please, to ask yourself, what kind of country are we leaving our young people? And the answer is not a good one. But for young people out there, do not take any of this as an excuse to say, I have an excuse for people to feel sorry. No, work harder, apply yourself, find the good, straighten out your path, make your goals sharp, make them clear, tell the truth, and do what is right. I'm still traveling nonstop, as you guys know. In fact, I have to go to a rally right now. So I have to go actually on Fox News, and I have to go speak. And that's why I can't be with you guys today. But before I go do that, I want to talk just applicably about this election, specifically about this election, I should say, and how it applies to you. This president is the most pro-life president in American history. Of Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, 200 circuit court judges on the Supreme Court. The embassy has been moved to Jerusalem. Golan Heights recognized. Iran deal canceled. Soleimani and al-Baghdadi are dead. Illegal immigration finally being taken seriously. A fighter for the faith. I call him the bodyguard of Western civilization. I call him a bodyguard for a very specific reason. When you guys hire a bodyguard, you don't care about the tweets. You don't care about the style and care. Instead, you care about, is he going to protect you? Is he going to be effective in being able to identify the opposition and protecting this gift we have been given? Please continue to advocate and support our president. Republicans up and down the ballot, people of faith, and people that protect life. The Democrats have become the party of arsonists, insurrectionists, and tearing our country apart from within. I am doing everything I possibly can in the next 45 days or however many days there are, because I will not be able to live with myself if I wake up and Senator Harris and Joe Biden get elected into the presidency. I will not be able to live with myself. I'm putting everything on the line. We're traveling nonstop. I'm speaking at 6 to 7 events a day. I'm doing 2 podcasts a day, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, because I know every person that I can reach and God willing persuade can help hopefully play a role in saving this republic and saving this incredible gift we have been given. So here are the marching orders, everybody. Outside of the rally and feeling good, become a poll watcher and an election judge. Do it today. Own your precinct. Know how your neighbors are voting. Look at them clearly and say, I'm voting for Trump. I'm a Republican, and here is why. The third thing is this. Take the education of your children incredibly seriously, please. The indoctrination of our children is the greatest threat to liberty tomorrow and liberty today. And the other action item is I have a library of podcasts with massive amounts of information of why the president deserves 4 more years. What is critical race theory? Who was Karl Marx? What is the Christian case for Trump? Did the Bible really build America? Please, and I encourage you guys to do this. It helps me a lot, and I would like nothing more than to beat the New York Times. And every time I speak at one of Jack's events, we do it. So if there's any new listeners out there, any new people that are saying, man, I want to help out with what this guy is saying, all you guys have to do is take out your phone right now. You type in Charlie Kirk Show, you hit subscribe, but check out those library of podcasts. And the last action item is this, everybody. Defend your country like it's something you love. Fight for this country. Knock on doors. Make phone calls. This is the action time, everybody. All the stuff we talk about is now coming down to these next couple weeks. This is where it all matters. This is where history will be decided. This is where 10 years from now we'll be able to say, I remember when we had a country where BLM Inc. didn't run the White House. I remember a country where we used to be able to have church. I remember a country where they didn't take all of our guns away. All of that and more is on the ballot. And you can already see what they're doing in California, where they say church is not essential, where they say that homelessness is somehow an essential activity, where they have abortion factories that are open and weed shops that are open, that they criminalize pastors and heroes like Rob McCoy, where they go out of their way to try to arrest people of faith, yet they allow BLM Inc. to burn down our cities. Don't let these people get to power. Stand strong. Be courageous. Be active. Here's the final optimistic note. If we rise, communicate, work, and vote, we win. Benjamin Franklin famously said when he was approached after the Constitutional Convention, we just celebrated Constitution Day. So, Mr. Franklin, what is it? Is it democracy, a dictatorship, a republic? And he said, it's a republic if you can keep it. It's in our hands. It's in your hands. Activism and the salvation of a civilization is not a spectator sport. Be an activist. Everything you do should reflect your values, how you vote, where you shop, how you educate your kids. That's what we are doing every single day at Turning Point USA, Turning Point Action, and the Charlie Kirk Show. I want to just say, God bless Jack Hibbs. If we had 100 Jack Hibbs across the country, our country would be an amazing place. He is an American treasure and hero. Again, we are giving out 50 signed copies of the MAGA Doctrine, freedom@charliekirk.com. Email us that you guys are subscribed. And just email any questions you have. I personally read all those emails. I got to go speak. I got to go do an interview here. But just remember, everybody, this is ours to lose. I will not be able to live with myself as a 26-year-old if I see these people take power. This is our call to action. Do something about it. God bless you. I can't wait to see you soon at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. Thanks so much. Talk to you guys soon.
I have good news for you. We have voter guides this election year for the state of California for congressional, Senate, and Assembly seats. Capital Resource Institute has put together these fabulous church-compliant voter guides that you can pass out at your church, that you can send links to your friends, so that way we can know where all these candidates stand on the issues. This is going to be a valuable tool for the church this year, so don't hesitate to visit Capital Resource Institute to get your voter guides.
And that's exactly what you did. You didn't hesitate to visit Capital Resource Institute. And so many of you did over the last hour, you crashed the website. But don't fear, they've opened up the gate. There's more room to get in. But man, oh man, between triggering all of those people on the other side of the aisle on Twitter, and they're actually beginning to drive the hashtag #ComebackCalifornia viral. It's actually starting to show up on the right-hand side, you know, where all the really viral stuff is. It's starting to show up over there. So keep it up, because we've got 2 more huge segments for you to tweet about. So put it on steroids. Now let me give you another Twitter hint. Something you can do to really help amplify this is, as you're tweeting, go through the tweets for hashtag #ComebackCalifornia and start liking them and start retweeting them. It amplifies. You can actually get another hashtag #ComebackCalifornia out there simply by retweeting it. So do that, because we still have a lot of important territory to cover here this afternoon. So Charlie said it at the end, a republic if you can keep it. Let me ask you to contemplate, and I'll tell you what I think the answer is after our next speaker. What is the most important political office in the entire country? Think about that. Because what Charlie was talking about was an interaction between Dr. Franklin and Mrs. Powell the day that the Constitution was ratified. And there's a really important thing that he said to her, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. Well, think about it in context. At the time, women could neither vote, nor hold office, nor own property. Now, Mrs. Powell happened to be the mayor of Philadelphia. She also happened to be the person that convinced George Washington to run for a second time and become our 4th president. So did she, who couldn't vote and couldn't hold office, have influence? She sure did, and she used that influence. All right, coming up now, one of the people that you have to have on speed radio dial to listen to every day, because you will learn more factual, statistical information so that you can clobber the left with the pearls that this guy puts out every day. I'm talking about Larry Elder. Larry Elder is a syndicated radio host with Salem Radio Network. His topic is the access of indoctrination, how Hollywood, media, and academia brainwash America. And those institutions are the domain of the political left, and Larry is going to bring it in ways that no one else can. Please give a warm virtual welcome and tweet out about him, a welcome for Larry Elder.
Don, thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. This is weird, speaking before a crowd of around 15 people. I understand we have almost 50,000 people out there who are watching, so thank you so much for taking the time to hear a few things I have to say. May I give you the Cliff Notes version of how I got into talk radio? As Don mentioned, I am in radio. I've been in radio for about 30 years. And here's how it happened. I was living and working in Cleveland, and I decided to write an op-ed piece for the newspaper. And I would often write things, and I would send them to the newspaper, and I would get back a nice little postcard saying, thank you for submitting it, but we don't think so. But every now and then one would get published. And I had one published in which I argued, this is almost 35 years ago, that racism is no longer a big enough factor to withhold anybody from becoming successful. So I get a phone call from a producer of a radio show. He says, did you write this? I said, yes. He said, are you black? I said, yes. He said, you don't believe that racism can hold back people right now in America? I said, no, not right now in America. At one time, of course, that was not the case, but right now, you work hard, don't make bad moral mistakes, you can become successful in America. He said, I produce a radio show. Would you mind coming on my guy's show tonight, talk about your article? So I came on. I should tell you, Cleveland is almost 50% black, so most of the callers were black, and I was called an Uncle Tom, a bootlicking Uncle Tom, a foot-shuffling bootlicking Uncle Tom, a bug-eyed foot-shuffling bootlicking Uncle Tom, an Oreo as in brown on the outside, white on the inside, coconut, same concept, the Antichrist, and then I was called the name that you call a black person when you really, really, really want to hurt them, cut them, and scold them. I was called Republican. A man can only take so much. So I remember telling myself that I'll never do that again. I get back to my office, the phone rings, it's the station manager. He said, I heard you today, you were amazing. I said, I was? He said, oh my goodness, you were. He said, you were funny, you have a good speaking voice, you took difficult positions, and you defended them without losing your temper. Have you ever thought about doing talk radio? And I said, no. And he said, why? And I said, I really don't like it. I don't like yelling at people. I don't like being yelled at. He said, are you married? At the time I was. He said, do me a favor, go home and talk it over with your wife and then call me tomorrow. I said, I will, but I doubt that I'll change my mind. I went home and I talked it over with my wife. And she said, well, what do you think about talk radio? I said, I know very little about it other than it seems shallow, glib, and stupid. She said, it is. You'd be good at it. So I decided to do it, and the week I did it, I fell in love with it. I mean, I heard angels singing. I said, you mean I can actually get paid for giving my point of view, all the things that have bothered me about the direction this country is going in? I can get paid for that? So I decided that's what I wanted to do. Ultimately, I met Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager had me on the radio show. He recommended me to management. Management gave me a 2-day audition. After 1 day, they said, do you want this job? I said, I think so. And they said, fine, go out tonight, have a good time, don't speak so damn quickly. And so I've been in talk radio ever since. Now, all these names I was called, bootlicker, Uncle Tom, sellout, all these things, out of all the list of names I gave you, I was called, you know what I was not called? I wasn't called wrong. I wasn't called wrong when I talked about what I thought was the #1 problem facing America in general and the #1 problem facing Black America in particular, and that is the large number of kids who are raised without fathers. Right now, 70% of black kids are raised without fathers. That number was 25% in 1965. That prompted a left-wing guy named Daniel Patrick Moynihan to write a report called The Negro Family, A Case for National Action. And he argued that 25% of black kids being born outside of wedlock was likely a product of slavery, likely a product of discrimination, likely a product of Jim Crow. And that may very well be the case. But certainly 70% from 1965 until now cannot be attributed to racism. That is a product of the welfare state. And what we've done in 1965, when Lyndon Johnson launched the so-called war on poverty with the best of intentions, we've incentivized women to marry the government, and we've incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And don't think about Larry Elder. What do poor people say? In 1986, the LA Times asked poor people whether they thought welfare was a stepping stone towards independence or whether it was a crutch that caused them to be eternally dependent. More said crutch, 41%, than said stepping stone, 31%. That was 1986. So these are poor people telling you that welfare, despite the best of intentions, is causing us to act as if we are on some sort of narcotic and is taking away our ability to be self-sufficient. Was I wrong when I talked about the effect of Hollywood? Roughly 90% of the political contributions given by people in Hollywood are given to left-wing causes or to Democrats. And this is a business that you name the left-wing cause, they will embrace it. This is a business that puts out a movie like Hurricane. Hurricane was a movie that starred Denzel Washington. You might remember it was about a man who was allegedly wrongfully convicted of murdering 3 people in Paterson, New Jersey around 1960, except he did murder 3 people. There was plenty of evidence to suggest that. And I said that on my radio show when the movie came out. And I got a phone call from one of the characters. If you saw the movie, the protagonist in the movie was a Canadian who read Reuben Hurricane Carter's book called The 16th Round, in which he argued that he was an innocent man wrongfully framed. So this character got involved and somehow got Hurricane Carter essentially released from prison. So I said all the stuff I said about the evidence, physical evidence. I get a phone call from the character who played this character. He was furious. He said, I just did this movie. Are you telling me that all the people that did this script and did all the research necessary to do the script did a movie about a man who committed a triple homicide? I said, yes. There's a website called graphicwitness.com/Carter. I suggest you look at it. It's going to take you almost a whole day to read everything there. You'll also find he took a polygraph and flunked it. He also said in the movie that he was convicted by 2 all-white juries. False. The second jury had 2 blacks. And by the way, the prosecutor, while the prosecutor was white, was a member of the NAACP. So read all that stuff. You're going to find eyewitness testimony, physical testimony, and the idea that he was an innocent guy rounded up by cops is also refuted by the fact that shortly after the homicides, cops pulled him over. They recognized him. They knew him. He said he wasn't involved. They trusted him. They let him go. So, to his credit, he read everything. He called me back the following night, and he apologized. This is Hollywood. Hollywood also did a movie about Dan Rather allegedly, correctly outing George W. Bush as having received favorable treatment from the Texas Air National Guard. It caused Dan Rather to lose his job from CBS, but voila, Hollywood does a movie called Truth, played by Robert Redford, where all of a sudden Dan Rather is in fact a hero. He's not a hero. He was properly fired because he violated journalistic integrity, because he wanted it to be true. He didn't care about the facts because it damaged George W. Bush. This is how Hollywood rolls, and they have a huge, huge impact on our culture. Was I wrong about academia? There is a magazine called American Spectator, which years ago looked at big colleges, small colleges, East colleges, West colleges, private, public, and found out that with a few exceptions, if you look at the humanities department where there is political science or history or sociology or women's studies, overwhelmingly these departments are occupied by professors and assistant professors and teaching assistants who are members of the left, as opposed to people who are members of the right. It is not uncommon to find, for example, a history department at, say, UCLA, where 30, 40 people, you might find 1 or 2 who might be registered as a Republican. That is it. So these kids, when they go to these colleges and universities, are not getting an education, they're getting an indoctrination. Why do you suppose the left wants to give free college tuition? Do you think they'd want to give free college tuition if the likelihood is when you go to college you're going to come out more Republican than when you went in? I don't think so. So Hollywood, academia, and of course we've got the media. And you've got newspapers like the New York Times. The New York Times has not endorsed a Republican for president since 1956. Think about that. Carter over Reagan? Bill Clinton over George Herbert Walker Bush? New York Times has not endorsed a Republican since 1956. New York Times is arguably the most important, most influential newspaper in the country. Arguably the second most important, most influential newspaper in the country is, of course, the Washington Post. The Washington Post has never endorsed a Republican for president in its entire history. Never. This is what we put up with. There is a book called Left Turn by a friend of mine named Tim Grosclose, who used to be a professor at UCLA. Now he's at George Mason University. And if you look at the top 20 sources of news in those days, the only 2 that go to the right were the nightly news on Fox by Bret Baier and the Washington Times. Outside of that, everything else was left-wing. ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, LA Times, go on down the list. 90% of Americans get their primary source of news from a left-wing source. This is what we're up against. And in this book, Left Turn, Professor Grosclose tried for the first time to quantify what we would call the effect or the damage done by our left-wing media. And he says the left-wing media gives the average Democrat candidate who runs for president an 8 to 10 point advantage out of the gate. This is what we're up against. Hollywood, academia, and media, I call them the axis of indoctrination. And we've got to fight back. The way to fight back is for more and more people to go into academia, more and more people to go into journalism, more and more people to do their own thing. We've got a lot of ability now because of our digital world for people to do their own thing. We've got people like Ben Shapiro, who's done the Daily Wire. We've got Breitbart. We have all sorts of conservative websites, conservative podcasts. For the first time now, the message can get out. But we've got to get it out. We've got to be active, and we have to stay aggressive. And we have to recognize that these guys do not share our values. This whole business about people in the streets right now, because of this assertion that the police are out mowing down black people just because they're black, this is exactly the end game of the axis of indoctrination, having indoctrinated people to the point where they believe this nonsense. I was watching just yesterday the post-game conference from the Lakers basketball game. The Lakers won last night. They beat the Denver Nuggets. But LeBron James is unhappy because he finished second in the balloting for most valuable player. This is the second time he's finished number 2. He's won the MVP 4 times, and he was not happy. And last night, he explained in a very polite way, he didn't want to diss the guy who won, why he thought LeBron, he should have had more consideration. And he outlined his case by using stats, by using logic, by using reason, by connecting everything, and he made a very persuasive case that he might have been overlooked. Same guy, a few days ago, in responding to the death of Ahmaud Arbery, the black man who was jogging, in responding to the shooting of Jacob Blake, the same guy who used his surgical, analytical mind to dissect why he should have gotten the MVP does not use any of that capacity for this issue. What did LeBron James say? We can't even leave our houses right now without fearing being killed. Why does this keep happening? Doc Rivers said something equally, the coach of the Clippers said something equally emotional. I saw Doc Rivers give a speech once at a country club. He talked about the upcoming season. He used facts, he used logic, he used reasoning, he used details. Same guy when it comes to this. Why is it that we keep loving America and America does not love us back? Doc, LeBron, what are you guys talking about? The same mentality that you use to analyze things in your profession would have caused you to say, how often do Americans have interactions with cops every year? Answer, 50 million times every single year Americans interact with a police officer. 50 million times. The same mind would then say, out of those interactions, how many result in arrests? Answer, 11 million of the interactions with the police result in arrests. Of those arrests, how many result in cops being assaulted? Answer, 60,000 cops assaulted every year, 50 killed every year. 50 million interactions, 11 million arrests, 60,000 cops assaulted, 50 killed, 1,000 people killed by the police, out of a population of 350 million. Of that 1,000, virtually every single one of them were men. Virtually every single one of them were resisting arrest with a weapon, with a gun, with a knife, or resisting violently. When you get down to the handful of white cops killing unarmed black people, out of the 1,000, you're talking about less than 4%. And unarmed does not necessarily mean not dangerous. Michael Brown was unarmed, but his DNA was found on the officer's gun, indicating he was attempting to seize that gun. So just because you're unarmed does not mean you're not dangerous. Amadou Diallo was an immigrant years ago in New York. He matched the description. The police were seeking somebody accused of a violent crime. They found him. They asked him to show his hands. He mistook the direction, reached for his wallet instead. They thought he was going for a gun. They blew him away. Hillary pronounced the cops involved murderers. A multi-ethnic jury found all the police officers not guilty. Now, that'll go down as an unarmed black man being killed, but unarmed and not reasonably perceived as dangerous are two very different things. So when you get down to the small number of white cops killing unarmed black men who were not reasonably perceived as a threat, is even less than the 4% of the total that I just now mentioned. Furthermore, the same mind, if you were to apply that to this, Doc and LeBron James, would ask myself, have there been any studies on this? Answer, yes, there have been. There is a black Harvard professor named Roland Fryer, and frankly, he bought the same narrative that you bought, LeBron. He assumed that the police were killing black people just because they were black. There were a number of high-profile killings in a period of time where there was Eric Gardner or Michael Brown or Freddie Gray in Baltimore or Tamir Rice in Cleveland. He just knew the cops were, in fact, killing blacks just because they were black. He was surprised no one had done a study on it, so he did. And not only did he not find that the police were killing blacks just because they were blacks, he found the police were more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than on a white suspect. Some researchers at University of Washington State read the same thing. Furthermore, it's not like the federal government has not been interested in this issue. Since the 90s, there's something called the Police Public Contact Survey, where every 3 years the DOJ asks 60,000 Americans, not a small number, 60,000, did you have an interaction with the police in the last year? If the answer is yes, then a series of questions follow up. How are you treated? How are you spoken to? They can't find any pattern whatsoever of any abuse. During the Obama administration, 2013, a study came out that was done by the National Institutes of Justice, which is the research arm of the DOJ, and the study was called something like Race and Traffic Stops, and it was true that black motorists were disproportionately pulled over compared to white motorists. But they also found the reason for this is that black motorists disproportionately broke the law, whether it was speeding, whether it was driving without a license, driving without a seatbelt, driving without a proper tag, you name the offense, a black motorist was more likely to commit it. Now, isn't this good news that the pulling over disproportionately of black motorists is not because of racism, but because of behavior? Isn't this good news? When Michael Brown was killed, in comes the DOJ to do a big study on the Ferguson PD, and they concluded that the Ferguson PD was institutionally racist. Why? Ferguson is 67% black. However, 85% of those who are stopped in traffic stops are black, an 18-point discrepancy, ergo institutional racism. Here's the problem. New York City, 25% black. 55% of those who are stopped in traffic stops are black, a 30-point gap. However, much of the street cops in New York are people of color. Why then isn't the NYPD more institutionally racist than the Ferguson PD, which is almost all white? And the answer is you can't do it by looking at those numbers without looking at rates of offending. And it is a fact that the number one preventable cause of death for a young white man is accidents, like car accidents or drownings. The number one cause of death, preventable or not preventable, for young black men is homicide. A young black man is 8 to 10 times more likely to be killed than a young white man is, and almost always the killer is another young black man. In recent years, at least as many unarmed whites have been killed by the police as have been unarmed blacks, at least. And at one point in this year, according to the Washington Post, there were 9 unarmed black men who had been killed at one point this year versus 19 unarmed whites who had been killed by the police. I defy anybody listening to me to name an unarmed white person who's been killed by the police because CNN doesn't care, Van Jones doesn't care, Don Lemon doesn't care, MSNBC doesn't care. It only works if the narrative is a white cop killing an unarmed black person. So you are being manipulated. It is rare. It almost never happens, and when it does, it is thoroughly investigated, and almost always a jury finds the officers acted within policy, or they find the officers not guilty. Because most people, once they sit down and they watch what a cop has to do in real time, they realize how difficult this is. In Baltimore in 2015, Freddie Gray died in police custody. You might recall he was in a police van, and apparently he hit his head on the wall as they were driving, and his neck snapped. He died. There were 6 officers who were prosecuted. 3 of them were black. The state attorney who brought the charges was black. A judge before whom 2 of the officers tried the case and found them, by the way, not guilty, black. The city council in Baltimore, all Democrat majority black. The number 1 person running the PD at the time, black. Number 2 person behind the PD, black. The U.S. Attorney General at the time, Loretta Lynch, black. And the President of the United States at the time, black. I'm reminded of a joke that Wanda Sykes, the comedian, made after Obama got elected. She said, how are you going to complain about the man when you are the man? So we need to knock it off. It's not institutional racism. There's no evidence, there's no data that supports that whatsoever. You are being manipulated, and the media is manipulating people because they want ratings and because a lot of these reporters have grown up under the access of indoctrination, and they believe this nonsense that racism remains a major problem in America, even though they look at their own lives, their choices of their own friends, the companies that they work for, they would then conclude that, no, I don't have racist friends, I'm not working for a racist country, but out there in the Netherlands, apparently the racism is going on. It's a con. And the reason Democrats are doing it, of course, is because they want votes. Think about it. You're a black person. What is it that the Democratic Party is offering you? I went to a school called Crenshaw High School. If you saw the movie Boys in the Hood, that's my high school. Right now, 3% of people at my high school can do math at grade level, and it is a Crip school. I know that because the rapper Ice-T chose my school 10 years after I went there because he wanted to go to a Crip school. Now, you're living within a geographical radius of that school. You are mandated, say the Democrats, to send your kid to that school, whether you're a kid who just graduated from middle school and is eager to learn, wants to go there or not. But the Republican Party wants to give you an option. And the route to the middle class is to get a good education. Which party is thwarting that route and which party is giving you an easier path? What is it about the Democratic Party that is appealing to black voters when it comes to the issue of illegal immigration? Probably the man who's done more research on the impact of legal and illegal immigration than anybody else is a man named George Borjas. He's an economist with Harvard. And he said there are winners and losers behind illegal immigration. Obviously, the big winners are the illegals themselves and people who hire them at lower rates than they otherwise would pay. But the big losers, says Professor Borjas, are unskilled black and brown workers who have to compete for jobs that they otherwise would hold, that are being held by illegal aliens who are unskilled, and who have to deal with the downward pressure on their wages because of the availability of illegal alien labor. So, for those two issues alone, the Democratic Party is on the wrong side of the best interests of black people, yet black people pull the lever like lemmings for the Democratic Party. Why? Because black people have been convinced by the left, by Don Lemon, by a whole bunch of other people that racism remains a major problem in America, when in fact, as I pointed out, it's never been more insignificant. And one of the purveyors of this nonsense is Barack Obama. When Barack Obama got elected, a whole lot of people thought that Barack Obama indicated we've turned the page. And it did indicate we turned the page. But he did not use it that way. He exploited it and he played the race card. I remember watching Senator Obama in 2004 in Boston when he warmed up John Kerry. I was with my producer. You might recall the speech. He said there's no blue America, there's no red America, there's just one United States of America. A bunch of platitudes. But he delivered it well. And I turned to my producer, I said, this guy is going to run for president someday, and someday he's going to get elected. Well, as you know what happened. When he decided to run, Hillary, of course, was the front runner. And Senator Obama appeared on 60 Minutes. He would not have appeared on 60 Minutes had it not been for the case that it appeared he might, in fact, make an impact in this race. And Steve Croft, the correspondent, said, Senator, if you don't win this race, will it be because of racism? And I sat back and I said, let's see how this man answers this question. And Senator Obama said, no. If I don't get the nomination, it will be because I have not outlined a vision of America that America can embrace. And I said to myself, hallelujah. I'll never vote for a tax, spend, regulate, soft on foreign policy. You don't understand the gravity of our fight against what I call Islamofascism. I'll never vote for somebody like that, but at least he's not what I call a victocrat. At least he's not going to be somebody playing the race card for every reason, no matter what. First opportunity he had to demonstrate that was when the Cambridge police arrested briefly Skip Gates. Remember that incident? This is a Harvard professor who's black, who was on vacation, had come back from vacation, had forgotten his door key. And he and his driver broke into the front door of his home. A neighbor saw this, didn't connect this man with the house, called 911, just as you want your neighbors to do. Cambridge police officer shows up, very politely sees a man in the house, doesn't know whether the man belongs to the house, very politely asks him to leave the house and show me ID. And instead of doing so, this tenured professor from Harvard said, I'll come out if your mama tells me, or something like that. He got briefly arrested. It becomes this big thing. And what did President Obama say? I'll tell you what he should have said. What he should have said is, you know, I had a long talk with my friend Skip Gates. I've known him a long time, and I can understand how anybody would be upset if the police shows up and basically accuses you of not belonging to the house that you've owned. However, the cop was simply doing his job, responding to an astute neighbor. Don't you want neighbors like that? And I told my friend Skip Gates, you are a role model. You are a black role model. And instead of telling people to comply, they won't die, to make sure that you follow officers' instructions and you be polite to minimize the possibility of something going south, you did the opposite. You escalated this matter and made something very trivial into something that could have been very grave. And I told him he should be better. and I'm telling America we all should be better. Instead, what did Obama say? The Cambridge police acted stupidly. No, they didn't. Trayvon Martin. If I had a son, he looked like Trayvon. Well, that jury found George Zimmerman, the man who killed Trayvon Martin, not guilty, and one minority member of the jury said race never came up. It wasn't an issue. And then Obama gives a speech before the United Nations and invokes Ferguson for crying out loud, even though Michael Brown never had his hands up, never said don't shoot. And as a result, we have something called the Ferguson effect. Some people are now calling it the Minneapolis effect, where because of these false accusations, cops are pulling back, bad guys know it, and the very people who are hurt are the very people that the Black Lives Matter proponents claim they care about. The other thing that happens because of this is some number of idiot will be provoked to kill officers because of a belief in this phony narrative. It happened in the latter part of Obama's second term when 2 officers were killed execution style as they sat in their squad cars in New York. 3 officers were killed execution style in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And 5 officers were killed execution style in Dallas, all by 3 different black men, all black men who either posted on social media or told friends that they believed in this phony narrative that the police were killing blacks just because they're black. So not only is it false, you're getting people killed. This election is one of the most important elections we've ever had. And I firmly believe that as the economy gets better and better and better, and it is, and as people become more and more comfortable with coexisting with COVID-19, and they are, that Donald Trump will get reelected. And it's ironic because Donald Trump, as you know, has been called everything other than the son of God, other than a child of God. He's been called a fascist, he's been called a Nazi, he's been called a racist, he's been called a Hitler. You name what he's been called. He's been called, the worst thing you can call anybody in America today is a racist. Yet one poll has his black support maybe at twice, if not 3 times, if not 4 times, what he'd gotten in 2016. And I'll tell you why. It's awfully difficult to beat historically low unemployment. Donald Trump also signed what's called the First Step Act. People are in the streets allegedly agitating over prison reform, criminal justice reform. Who signed the First Step Act? That's the act that has allowed so far 5,000 mostly black men to have their sentences reconsidered and reduced an average of around 75 months. 2,000 of them have been released altogether. Obama didn't sign it, Trump signed it. Trump also pardoned Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson is the first black heavyweight champion who was convicted of violating the so-called Mann Act, which is a law that says you cannot transport a woman across state lines for illicit purposes. And the illicit purpose was the white woman they transported across state lines happened to be white. Well, this is a 15-year law effort on the part of people like Ken Burns, the left-wing guy that does the documentaries, and Sylvester Stallone, the actor, to pardon Jack Johnson. George W. Bush didn't do it. Obama didn't do it. Donald Trump did. Donald Trump's also spending more money on so-called historically black colleges than any president in history. He's expanding the money that we're spending on so-called enterprise zones, reducing taxes and regulations in urban areas designed to spark entrepreneurial activity. And as I mentioned, he's done something about illegal immigration. Those caravans have stopped, haven't they? All of a sudden, the caravans have stopped. Why? Because Donald Trump changed the laws so that now you have to, if you're someone from Central America, a so-called migrant, you have to apply for asylum in the first safe country that you enter, and that country is Mexico. He's also, Donald Trump, forced Mexico to put 25,000 of its military on its southern border, so illegal immigration through the southern border, through this caravan stuff, has stopped. Isn't that extraordinary? And as I also mentioned, this is a man whose Department of Education supports choice, giving inner city parents an option out of an underperforming government school. How important is this? Consider this. The average family, around 10% of Americans have their kids in private school, around 6% of black families do. In Philadelphia, public school teachers in Philadelphia, those with school-age kids, 44% of them have their own school-age kids in private school. In Chicago, the public school teachers, those who have school-age kids, 39% of them have them in private schools. Now that's the equivalent of having a restaurant and putting out a sign saying, come on in, just don't eat the food. And you have one party that wants to do something about it and one party that does not? Are you kidding me? I would like to say a quick word about why I'm so optimistic about this country, why I'm so optimistic about America. It is because of my mother, it's because of my mother and my father. They both taught us, my brothers and me, no one can make you feel inferior without your permission. My father, I wrote a book about my father called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours, about the 8-hour conversation that he and I had when I was 25 years old after not speaking to him for almost 10 years. My father was a very moody person, a very abrupt person, and I mistook that for lack of love. It couldn't have been further from the truth, but that's how I felt until we had a 10-year conversation. And during that conversation, I told my dad for the first 20 minutes of our conversation everything he'd ever said to me, everything he'd ever done to me, everything that he'd ever said that bothered me, and why I had not spoken to him for 10 years. After I finished telling him everything I could tell him, he looked up and he said, "Is that it? You didn't speak to me for 10 years because of that?" And I said, "Yes." And for the next 8 hours, this man told me about his life. And the man got bigger and bigger, and Larry got smaller and smaller. He said, "You know your last name, Elder?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That's not my biological father's name." "What is your biological father's name, Dad?" "I don't know. I never met him." "You never met your father?" "No." "Who was Elder?" "Elder was some guy who was in my mom's life the longest." "Some guy in your mom's life the longest?" He said, "Yes." He stayed in my mom's life for about 3 or 4 years. He was an alcoholic who was physically abusive to my mom, physically abusive to me when I tried to stop it. And then when I'm 13 years old, he said, I came home and I was making too much noise to my mom's then boyfriend. Mom sides with the boyfriend, throws my father out of the house, never to return. You're talking about a 13-year-old black boy, Jim Crow South, at the beginning of the Great Depression. And I said, "Dad, what did you do?" And for the next 8 hours, he told me about his life. He went down the road. He did anything he could. He ultimately became a Pullman porter for the trains. They were the largest private employer of blacks in those days. And my dad came out to California on a run, and it was sunny, and my dad said he could walk into a restaurant in the front door and get served? My goodness. And so he made a mental note, maybe someday I'll relocate to California. Pearl Harbor, my dad joins the Marines. Why the Marines, Dad? And those of you who are Marines know what I'm going to say. 2 reasons. They go where the action is, and I love those uniforms. My dad was stationed on the island of Guam. Bombs fell. My dad goes to Chattanooga, where he had met and married my mom, to get him a job as a short order cook because he was in charge of cooking in the Army. He was a staff sergeant. My dad can look at a cake and tell you what's in it. He goes to restaurant to restaurant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to get a job as a short order cook, and he's told, "We don't hire niggers," to his face. My dad goes to an unemployment office. The lady says, "You went through the wrong door." My dad goes out of the door, sees colored only, goes to that door to the very same lady who sent him out. She just wanted him to know what the rules were. My dad came home to my mom and said, "I'm going to California where I was some time ago. I'm going to get me a job as a cook and I'll send for you." My dad comes out to LA, walks around for a day and a half, and he's told by restaurant after restaurant, "You don't have references." My dad said, "I need a reference to make eggs? I cook for thousands of GIs. I'll tell you what, I'll work for free if you give me a reference." They wouldn't even do that. My dad goes to an unemployment office, this time just one door. He sat there for a day and a half. Lady calls him up and says, "I've got something, sir. I'm not sure you'll want it." My dad said, "Of course I'm going to want it. I have obligations." She says, "It's a job at Nabisco brand bread cleaning toilets." My dad did that for 10 years, took a second job at another bread company cleaning toilets, cooked for a family on the weekend, and went to night school 2 or 3 nights a week to get his GED. The man never slept. That was why he was so grouchy all the time. Imagine 15 minutes of sleep here, 10 minutes here, an hour here, not day after day, not week after week, not month after month, year after year after year, and then you come home to a house full of 3 rambunctious boys. How are you going to feel? So this man got bigger and bigger and bigger. As I said, I got smaller and smaller and smaller, and now I'm crying. And I said, "Dad, please forgive me." And my Republican father, who always said, Democrats want to give you something for nothing. And when you try and get something for nothing, you almost always end up getting nothing for something. My dad said this, "Larry, just follow the advice I've always given you and your brothers. Hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. Larry, you cannot control the outcome. You can't, but you can control the effort. You are 100% in control of the effort. And before you moan or whine about what somebody did to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it, and say to yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome?" And finally, Larry, no matter how hard you work, no matter how good you are, sooner or later bad things are going to happen to you. How you deal with those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. And about my mom, as I mentioned, always taught my brothers and me, nobody can make you feel inferior without your permission. In school, in high school, I took a course on black literature. We read a poem by a guy named Countee Cullen. It goes like this. While riding through old Baltimore, so small and full of glee, I saw a young Baltimorean keep a looking straight at me. Now, I was young and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled. But he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until September. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. Well, the class was upset. The teacher was furious. She talked about how this was going to be a permanent stain to his psyche, how this is always going to make him feel like a second-class citizenship, that he'll never, ever forget this. It'll be a constant stain. And I knew my mother was going to say something different. I wasn't sure what. So I got home that day. My mother was in the kitchen frying some chicken. I'll never forget it. I said, Mom, we studied a poem in class. I want to get your reaction to it. She said, yeah, what is it? I said, it goes like this. While riding through old Baltimore, so small and full of glee, I saw a young Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. Now, I was young and very small, and he was no whit bigger, and so I smiled. But he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until September. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. Mother took the fork out of the pot, hit it on the side. He said, Larry, what a shame he let something so trivial spoil his vacation. How many wings do you want? Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for inviting me and for listening to me. May God continue to bless America. May God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Larry. Thank you for being with us here at #ComebackCalifornia. Well, it's time to tie up some loose ends from our conference today. We're almost done. And in the beginning of the conference, I asked you to, and I framed it up this way. Don't let today be about information or entertainment. Let today be about an experience that will open you up to some new opportunities about how you can get involved. It's so important to understand when those doors before you are opening and closing, because sometimes you never really get an alarm, you just get an opportunity. And that opportunity to walk through that door can change the course of history. It can be a destiny kind of a thing. Information like we've gotten today means nothing until we put it to work. So in this vacuum of political activism that's out there, in this vacuum of a lack of people really doing things, there are a lot of people doing things, but there is so much more room. Reach out and seize that opportunity. Use some of the notes that you've taken today to maybe inspire you to do something different, to do something a little more. If you were going to knock on some doors, knock on a few more. If you're going to write some postcards, write a few more. If you were thinking about doing something, do it, because you never know where that can lead. Now, I did tease a few things earlier in the day that I want to share with you. We talked about some of the propositions. We didn't go through all of them today, but I want to give you the cheat sheet. Here's the cheat sheet to know what to do with those 12 propositions. There's only two that really deserve a yes vote, 20 and 22. Put that together, it's 2022, that's the next election cycle, so vote yes on 2022. It's a real easy thing to remember, it's a really easy thing to share. So if you have people that are like, gosh, all those propositions, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say. Well, just say yes on 2022, and that's an easy way to communicate what we should be voting for and against when it comes to a whole host of areas. Criminal justice. 20 is the Keep California Safe Act, now Proposition 22. That's the one that dials back in some of the loopholes of Prop 47, 57, and AB 109. 22, it's the partial but big fix, an important fix to AB 5. No on 15, that's the one that wants to tax us an additional $12 to $20 billion a year that's going to show up in the cost of our goods and services. There's so much more with the propositions. There's so many civics lessons. Homeschoolers, use those propositions as an opportunity to give your kids a civics lesson, because there's a lot going on in those propositions. So earlier, before Larry spoke, I asked you to think about what is the most important political office in the entire country. Well, Judge Brandeis, who was a Supreme Court justice up through 1941, and this is one of his famous quotes, said the most important political office is that of private citizen. And I think he was really on to something, because today, 100 years, almost 80 years later, there's a crisis in citizenship. We don't know what the proper care and feeding of the republic is. We've forgotten those civics lessons, if generations even had them. One of the blessings, Larry finished up with a poem about Baltimore. I grew up in Baltimore, and that was a real blessing growing up, literally in the crucible of the founding of this country, with Philadelphia to the north and Washington, D.C. to the south, right in the middle of all those famous Civil War battlefields. We were never at want for lessons in history. You take a bike ride in the country, you pass battlefields from the Civil War. Not so much out here, but that lesson of civics is really important, because that instills in our brains almost a DNA of what the responsibility of a citizen is in a republic. And remember what Franklin told Mrs. Powell, a republic if you can keep it. There are so many lessons today, so many opportunities that we have to live and fulfill that most important role in a republic if you can keep it. That's being the citizen that the republic needs in order to do the proper care and feeding of a republic. And that's why when Jack said that his title for his talk today is The Stewardship of the Republic. I had the opportunity to meet Pastor Jack many years ago when I first fell down the political rabbit hole. I share this story sometimes, and I think it's appropriate now, because as we're getting ready to figure out who to vote for, he had a very simple system. I like simple. Simple system for trying to figure out how someone once elected would vote. How would they legislate? 3 things. Are they pro-life? 1. We heard a lot about pro-life today from several speakers. Are they pro-marriage? We heard a lot about the implications that the slippery slope of marriage has caused in our culture. And then 3, something that people are saying that Trump should win the Nobel Prize for. Where do they stand on Israel? Do they believe that Israel is our friend, our partner in the planet, our ally? Those 3 things have been found to validate that someone will vote 100% conservative values. I learned that from Pastor Jack, and his church is blowing up in the midst of this COVID crisis. People are hungry for leadership. People are hungry for leaders in the faith-based community to show them what to do, to help them understand what to do. So to finish up today's hashtag #ComebackCalifornia, nimble up your thumbs, get your keyboards ready, because there's a lot still to come with Pastor Jack Hibbs, senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills.
Don, thank you. And I just want to publicly thank Don for being an amazing host. And he's the man. And for those of you who listen to his radio program on a regular basis, every day, daily, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I want to give a special thanks in conclusion to all of our speakers. To think at a time like this, they made the time to travel here and to be here and to make this something that matters to them, because the direction of California matters to them. And it's something that should matter to each and every one of us. And so as we end this, I want to end with prayer, and I want to end with an exhortation from the Word of God. So Father, we thank you. We believe that you're the one that has inspired this gathering, and to call it Comeback California. As I said earlier this morning, that California's got a foundation to come back to if we would only choose to do that, and if good people would choose to do that. And people who have been on the fence would wake up and choose to do that. And perhaps most importantly, your people, the professing Christian in California. Lord, that you would speak and rally people to righteousness, It's not about a party, it's about policies. It's not about rhetoric, it's about results. And it's not about who can win the polls. It's about the one who will do what heaven has decreed from the Bible. And we thank you right now that even at this hour, the United States of America is trending pro-life. That there's a wake-up call taking place. And our nation is brought to the valley of decision in this next election. And may we choose right. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. The Bible tells us in the book of Isaiah chapter 10, woe unto those who write misfortune for the people, who write unjust laws. And in the state of California, we have been victimized by the very ones who we have sent collectively as a people to represent us. Right outside this building to my right flies the flag of the United States of America. And in flag poles around this community, there's that flag standing tall, and there's the flag of the state of California, and it says California Republic. And California Republic, that word republic implies that we the people have a say. But unfortunately in California, because of neglect and apathy, our state has fallen into hands of what is called a supermajority. That's why there's no longer any voice of we the people. And that's happened on our watch, and yet it's not too late. I want to talk about that republic, and it is beautifully accurate what Don said when Franklin and Adams and the rest of them came out of that gathering together there regarding the Constitution, that it was a republic. And he challenged when that woman made that question to Franklin. The answer was, it's a republic if you can keep it. And those words now are prophetically true in the culture in which we're living in today. So I want to talk very briefly, very quickly regarding the gift of a republic. Again, remember, a republic is that we the people have been given the opportunity to pick our leaders. For those of you who come from a Judeo-Christian worldview value, that is a biblical gift. That is a truth. That God says, example to Israel, pick your leaders. Pick them. That is a blessing. That is a gift. And to be in a republic is to have a republic like we do in the United States of America, friends. Remember, this nation is still the only nation in the world that people are trying to break into to live here. There's a reason for that. Number one, the gift of a republic allows us to share our thoughts and our words freely. And we're to do it in a sense of respect and of mutual love for neighbor. If you heard earlier this morning, you heard Seth talk about neighbor, to love our neighbors. And that even applies to the unborn child, that we as believers are commanded to love our neighbors. And that love binds a society together. And you and I live in a culture whereby we can express and we can share. We have the freedom of speech. We've got the First Amendment. And it's all based upon us speaking our minds and living our lives in a respectful manner, that we can disagree with one another with respect. California has lost that ability. We're now hyper on emotion, ill logic, senselessness, and lawlessness, because we have not nurtured that sacred trust of loving one another in a republic. John Adams said that this form of government in the United States only works for a moral and religious people. Listen, that's what Adams said. Is he a prophet? Is John Adams prophetic when he says it only works for a moral and a religious people? I love that, because you can be moral and not be religious. And if you're religious, you ought to be moral. And so this nation and this state works right when there's mutual love and respect for one another. And yet we've lost that because, listen, our hearts have gone far from God. And that's why it's called Come Back, California. You may think it's a word to you about coming back to California and voting, or even somebody posted a moment ago that they would like to come back to California now when they see such a presentation of today, that it's a state worth fighting for. And that's a good word, that's true. But it's for California to come back to those freedoms and those liberties that we have enjoyed. We must not forget them, but This republic allows you and I to share our hearts and our minds. And the university campus, of course, should be the greatest place for that, the exchange of ideas. But it's anything but that now. And what about our churches? And what about our communities? Are you allowed to share and to express? Will you wake up with me and realize that all of a sudden there's not only the cloud of smoke covering this state because of the fires, but there's a cloud that's almost greater, and it's a cloud of fear and intimidation. And if you're not wearing a mask, or if you do not do a certain thing, or if you tweet this or post the other, that you're somehow beaten down and mocked and ridiculed by this movement of lawlessness? Are we as a people going to allow that to continue? Or are we going to fight to go back to what this Constitution of ours, both in this state and in our nation, allows us to share our hearts and our minds freely? Because until we get back to that, we will hear, like we heard today, a continued propagation of leftist agendas in our schools and even in our elementary schools that have no doubt pervaded our universities today. Secondly, under this consideration about the gift of a republic is the fact that it allows us to engage. We have an amazing freedom in America to engage our culture for what we believe is true and sacred. And I speak from the Christian worldview, a Judeo-Christian worldview, a biblical worldview, and I have the right and the freedom to engage. People will tell me, Pastor, you need to be quiet because you're a pastor. That's not only unconstitutional, it's unheard of. America's great history was founded upon the concept of liberty. And yet the one who was responsible for sharing the concept of liberty was none other than Samuel Adams. And Samuel Adams said that he got that understanding of liberty from the pulpits of colonial America. It was known as the Black Robe Regiment pastors who spoke about engaging the culture and about letting truth out like a lion loose in the streets. But that happened because those pulpit ministers got done preaching on Sunday and they went out into the community that was around them. That's why, as I mentioned many times in addresses before, that when you go back to the east coast of the United States and the older the cities, you see this strange pattern of roadway, odd. Here out west, everything's on a grid, not back there. Roads will seemingly be confusing until they all meet at a center point of a city or a town in our colonial states. And at the center of that town, without doubt, was the church of the region. In all of these cities, it was the church that was the epicenter of truth. It was the church that was the epicenter of engaging the culture. That's why today, and I own a wonderful volume of books that have the ancient colonial sermons of pastors, and those sermons were addressing the great earthquake that took place in such and such a location. The Boston Tea, a sermon delivered on the first Sunday after the Boston Tea Party. What were they doing? They were men of God who knew the Word of God, and they applied it to the culture in which they lived in today. And that's what God would have the church do today as well. More on that in a bit. I will come to this next point, and that is the republic that you and I have right now allows us as pastors to preach the gospel. I said allows us to preach the gospel. Number one, as a pastor, I am commanded to preach the gospel with or without a republic that gives me that freedom. My boss is God, the message is his, and I am to proclaim his message even if it costs me my life. Every pastor, if he's called by God, is signed up for that. And so in a big sense, we approach the pulpits as though we were dead men, because we are only to regurgitate God's truth. We are only to give and to preach what God has said. A republic allows us that. I've got freedoms here that pastor friends in Iran, they do not have. Or in Vietnam, pastors who you'll enjoy in heaven, they don't have the freedom that I have or that you have. This republic, this government that we have allows us. I'm grateful. Maybe you don't know this, but I am grateful to President Trump that within 4 weeks of his presidency, he removed the application of the Johnson Amendment. In 1954, Senator Lyndon Johnson from Texas didn't like what Christians were saying about him, and he decided that if I become senator, I'm going to silence the pulpits. That's the problem, it's the pulpits. And so the Johnson Amendment was crafted, and at the 11th hour it was passed. And while he was senator, he silenced the pulpits. That's a tragic thing, because what happened is that pastors surrendered the pulpits. Because it's an unconstitutional law that's on the books today. It's never once been supported by our law enforcement or by our judiciary. We try every year to try to invoke a lawsuit to get it removed from the books. It's unconstitutional because it silenced the mouths of pastors. What we didn't expect is that pastors would willingly silence themselves. Right in the middle of a republic, so many pastors and pulpits have grown quiet. I want to remind you that we live in a republic, and while we still have it, we've got the freedom to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is this: for God so loved the world that he gave his only glorified, begotten Son, that whosoever would believe in him would not perish but have everlasting life. That Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins, and America is riddled with sins as a nation, and we are riddled with sins as a people. That he died on the cross for our sins, and Jesus Christ, according to the Bible, 3 days later rose again from the dead. And anyone who will trust him, God will forgive you of your sins and transform your life. You know, I got to tell you, Larry Elder, before he came out, he asked me, "What's your story, Jack? What's your story? How did this church happen?" And I told him. I encountered Jesus Christ on Monday night, June 20th, 1977, and God changed the way that I thought from that moment on. How did that happen? Because of a republic, which allows us the freedom to publicly preach the gospel. And on that night, there were thousands of people listening to the evangelistic message on that night, brought by a young teenager by the name of Greg Laurie. And I heard the gospel, and I'm grateful for that freedom and for that liberty. Next, I want to talk to you about the curse of a republic. Those things I mentioned a moment ago, they're the blessings. They're the gifts of a republic. It allows us these freedoms to engage, to speak, to share, to preach, to go public. What about the curses of a republic? There are curses in a republic, and the curse of a republic is that it demands that you and I know what's going on regarding this government that's been committed to us. That's why Franklin said what he said. He said to her, "Madam, we give you a republic if you can keep it." Just that statement alone by Franklin is prophetic, because it implies combat, it implies argumentation, it implies that we know what it is we have. Do you have friends in Canada? Do you have friends in South America? Do you have friends in England? Or maybe in Germany? Look, a couple of nights ago, I had a friend here from Israel, and as they are overwhelmed with the liberty that we have handed to us as American citizens, but very few people know it. You know what's strange? While the church is hiding, and it's seemingly pastors have pulled the blanket up over their head, our streets have run wild with lawlessness. And in a moment where the pulpit and the Christian and freedom-loving people should rise up in a republic, to announce what's wrong, how this should be done, we should love one another, there should be mutual respect, and to demand of our government the putting down of violence. God doesn't sanction violence. Why is it continuing? Why have we gone something to like 100 days in Portland, Oregon? Why? Because people allow it. Why are people allowing it? Because we refuse to know. If we know what we've been given from our founding fathers, when was the last time, for example, you read the Mayflower Compact? It's 2 paragraphs. You ever wondered, listen up everybody, have you ever wondered why some people say that though we live in a secular nation, which is true, thank God for that. We don't have a government that says you must be a Catholic or you must be an evangelical or you must be. No, our founding fathers who believed in God gave us a secular government that was assembled by Judeo-Christian values. How do we know that? The Mayflower Compact. The founding fathers of our founding fathers said, we've come here to this continent to propagate the gospel of Jesus Christ. And with the birthing of this nation comes a great looming curse. And that is we fumble this republic right at the end zone. We've marched all the way down the field, one battle after another, to maintain what so many have laid down their lives to the point of death to provide for us and our children and our grandchildren. And we fumble it because of the fact that we don't know what it is that we live in. Not too long ago, I took a group of pastors to the Mexico-California border. I was grateful to the Department of Homeland Security with that request. They accommodated that, and they showed us what was going on. And I asked one of the agents, I said, how many people? We were standing at the wall, and they were talking about all the great success that the wall has had regarding human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, incredible success. And I asked him, how do you prevent people from breaking into Mexico from this location? And he said, I'm sorry, what did you say? I said, how do you keep people from breaking into Mexico from America? What's happening on the other side over there? And he laughed and he said, I've never known that to happen. Nobody is breaking into Mexico. Mexico's trying to get into here. Guatemalans are trying to get into here. Why? They want freedom. Most of us can't even define what freedom is. The Bible tells us that without vision, the people perish. If we don't know what it is that's been handed to us, and if it's not communicated from the pulpits of America like they did nearly 300 years ago, then how will the people know what to defend? What do they know to fight for? They won't have any clue, and that's a great problem. And if you think I'm making this up, go look at your child's 6th and 7th grade social studies curriculum, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Unless your child is homeschooled or charter schooled, your child doesn't have a clue as to the truth about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the fact that they owned slaves, but what they thought about that and how they determined to change it. Your kid's not hearing about that. Or what about John Adams and Samuel Adams, who both of them refused to own slaves? What about George Washington, who inherited slaves and not only took care of them, but at the time of Washington's death, did you know that Washington bequeathed much of his wealth to a man by the name of William Billy Lee, a black man? And Washington loved that man. Thomas Jefferson had his slaves taught the Bible, and they learned how to read and write, which was against the order of the Crown of England on the pains of death. It's hard to turn a big ship. But Jefferson, Benjamin Rush, John Adams, they were committed to establishing the abolitionist movement in the United States of America. Do we know that? Do we know that when we go to the Lincoln Memorial and we stand there at that great erected building, and inside there is that sculpture of Lincoln, bigger than life, that just to your right, his left, are some 5 references out of the Bible in his inaugural address? It's not taught in public schools. Did you know at the top of the Washington Memorial, at the very pinnacle of that spire, on its 4 corners that come to a point right there, it says, "Glory be to God" at the top? The President of the United States, when they fly over that and they descend by protocol. They see it. On and on it goes. We don't know what to fight for, and we don't know what to defend because we don't know what the demand is. The curse of a republic is that it demands that you and I know. And then secondly, it demands that you and I defend. There's a great passage in Scripture when King David was going to war, and The men were all suited up. David told them, sanctify yourself, for tomorrow we go into battle, and the Lord will give us the victory, but you need to separate yourself unto God. And obviously the great military contingency went to war, but there was a group of military personnel that were ordered to stay behind to guard the city and to guard the storehouses. And God gave a great victory to Israel. And then there was the talk about glory. God gets the glory, but look what these warriors did. And it was made known in the Bible that King David understood that those soldiers who stood behind and guarded what was at home were just as responsible for the victory as those soldiers who gave their life on the field. That's how something is maintained. That's how something is kept. And defending the United States, not all of us go to military combat or war. There are those who stay behind. But we have to defend it. It's got to be defended. That's why we are in this Kairos moment of our nation. Did you ever think that 1 year ago we'd be in the situation we're in right now? Whatever's going on is going on at breakneck speed. Would you agree with that? And we have lawlessness, as I said. We have looting, pillaging, destruction, mayhem. We need to defend this nation against anarchists, against those who are willing to take it by force. And that's what they're doing. They want to destabilize the United States because they believe that good people, like Sir Edmund Burke warned about nearly 300 years ago, all that evil needs to do to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Apathy has brought California to the place that it's in. It's interesting, a friend of mine told me, who a member of the U.S. Congress, he said, you know what's interesting? He said, I got to give it to my Democrat opponents. He said, regarding me, he said, of his party, Republicans, he said, Republicans fight until they win. And that's true. But he mentioned the Democrats, they keep fighting win or lose. They never stop. They just keep going. And that's to be commended. We fight until we lose, and then we give up. Can I encourage you today, fellow Californian, that you would just take it upon yourself to honor God and to honor this republic and to defend it by making sure your vote, first of all, that you register to vote. You better hurry. You're running out of time. You register to vote, and then you vote, and then you make sure your vote counts. That means if you've got to walk your ballot down to the registrar's office, do it. But find out how to make sure your vote's secure. Don't let somebody tamper with your ballot. Own it. A lot of this stuff would go away right now if Americans, and Californians specifically, would just own their vote and defend it. Instead, we do everything where we cart it off or we hand it off to somebody else, and we know in California that's not gone well. But we need to defend it. All of us from our different angles. If you're a school teacher, you need to teach accurate American history. Regardless of what the California School Board tells you and regardless of what your union tells you, will someone be strong and teach the truth? That's what we need. That's how we defend it. And be encouraged. From biblical times all the way through, think about World War II, for example. Great victories are wrought by those who are terribly outnumbered. God gets the glory, and we get to pick the fruit. God is calling you as an individual, one California citizen after another, to own their responsibility to defend this republic, or else all will be lost in short order. Third, under this point, it demands that you and I project our voice into this republic. We need to say what is right and true instead of being silent. We've got to stop being silent. We have been beaten down. And listen, I don't want to get off on the topic regarding masks. I'll just say this. With masks, I find it significant. I can't tell if somebody's happy or sad. With masks, I can't tell if somebody is speaking to me or not, for crying out loud? With masks, it's almost as though we've taken the soul out of someone's appearance. And symbolically, with a mask, it seems like nobody has an opinion anymore. We're all like lemmings in a line marching off the end of the cliff. No one questions. No one's asked why. No one's engaging. And no one's projecting truth into the argument. Why do you think there's so much confusion regarding the COVID issue? Expert saying the opposite of an expert. That should give you a great warning. What's going on here? We have seen things happen in our nation over the course of these last 3 to 4 years that we never would have thought would happen, and now here it all is. How's it going to go? Well, it can only go bad if a lot of good people do nothing. We have got to project, listen, we've got to project our will into this government that God has given us the stewardship responsibility over. Every 2 and 4 years, the United States of America, be it the electing of a governor or senators, congressmen, or a president, the longest living constitutional form of government in the history of man is the United States of America. And every 2 to 4 years, we have a revolution with a ballot. Not with guns, not with swords, not with military coups. We the people. What does that mean? It means that God has given you and I the holy trust and the responsibility to project forward what this nation will be like for our children and our grandchildren. I had an elderly man tell me, I got to tell you, it tested my Christian patience. An elderly man told me, I don't care how it goes. I'm not voting. I'm old. That's, for me personally, that's one of the most godless things I've ever heard. How selfish can you be? How heartless can you be? We can't think like that anymore. We need to project what is right. If you're 18 years of age or older, you can project what is right and what is important. And so as we begin to land this, we've talked about the gift of a republic, what it affords us, the stewardship of it, the curse, that all these things that it demands of us, if we don't step up, the curse of the republic would take out its finger, as it were, and to say to us, I was willing, I was able, I was ready, but you didn't support me. Can you imagine the Constitution, as it were, being personified, and it would speak and say, I wanted to preserve you, but you didn't engage me, you didn't seek me. The curse of a republic's possible. I pray that we're not there. But there's also an answer for a republic. And it is probably what you thought. We have to stand up. We have to stand up. Now listen, I'm going to talk to the Christian right now for a moment. And I'm going to put it this way. To the Christian mind, which is not a biblical mind that says, God's in control of everything. I'm just going to read my Bible on Sunday, and I'll just leave it to God. You didn't get that from the Bible. That's apathy. That is a bizarre way of thinking. Isn't it interesting? I mentioned David earlier. God told Israel, God told Joshua, God told David, go into battle. Gideon, go into battle. For tomorrow I will deliver the enemy into your hands. Could not have God delivered the enemy into Israel's hands in the first place? Yes. But God said, go into battle. Why? I'm sure there's many answers, but this one to me is most true. God said, when you're old and your children are around you, tell them what great exploits I have done for you. Tell them how against all odds I brought you through the waters and through the fires, and I preserved you as a people. I believe God wants to do that with America. I believe God wants to do that with California. You got to stand. The Bible says, I'm talking to the Christian right now, after you have stood and you're standing, the Bible says in Ephesians 6, stand therefore. It means keep standing. Keep standing. But we got to stand up to keep standing. Yeah, but Pastor, what if somebody makes fun of me? No, not if. They will. Stand anyway. Stand for what's right. Yeah, but what if we lose? You can look at yourself in the mirror and you can look at God in the day of judgment and say, I stood for what is right. Stand. Next, know the issues. All today, you've heard about the issues. Homeschooling, public school, the media, movies. I'm sure I missed the judgeships, courts. You've heard it. You need to know the issues. As a parent, you need to know the issues about your school board. Where you live. Where's your kid going to go to school? What are they teaching? You know, listen, I'm going to tell you right now. You're a taxpayer. You pay the wages of that school district. Those are your children. The number one mistake people make is that they think the public school system has their children's best interest in mind. They do not. They have money in mind. And right behind that, close second, is indoctrination. To create a generation of like thinkers, as of these progressives that have come out of these universities that now teach in our schools. You need to know what's being taught because you've got the authority. Get involved in PTA. That's where the money is held. Is your kid in that school? Go to the school board meetings and sign up or become a member of the PTA. You've got to do this. We need to stand up. We need to know the issues. Maybe you're a homeowner and the issues that are coming. This is certainly true in our state. There are certain people running for office. You need to know who they are in your community. And their voting record is clear. The first chance they get, they're going to raise your property taxes. They're going to raise your gas taxes. They're going to raise your sale tax. They're going to tax you to death because that's what they do. You need to know those issues. What about propositions? You've heard about propositions. A lot of people just willy-nilly either don't vote on a proposition or they just plop down the pen not knowing what they're doing. You need to know. And it's easy to know in this day and age. Easier now than ever, but know the issues. And then finally, I want to end with this, is a word to the pulpits of California. And in my notes right here, just scribbled, I have pulpits and pulpiteers. That's the extent of my notes on that. There's pulpits, and then there's pulpiteers. And the pulpiteers I'm not very interested in. A pulpiteer would be somebody who's being paid to produce sermons. And not interested in that. I'm interested in pulpits. The pulpit is supposed to be a place of truth and unwavering commitment. It's the pulpit that the Californians are supposed to go to get strength and courage and commitment to live their life to the glory of God and to affect their culture in righteousness until Christ comes. And when I say Christ comes, I mean this: when Christ comes to take us to heaven. Maybe somebody is saying, oh, I see what you're all about. You want to get politically involved, so you create a California and then you create America that's so awesome that God can establish his kingdom here on earth. No, wrong, never going to happen. That's heresy. I believe standing and letting your light so shine before men. By the way, Jesus meant the men of the world. Let your light shine. That implies darkness. Let your light shine in darkness to the men and women of this world unbelieving, so that when they in the day of judgment see your good works, they'll glorify your Father which is in heaven. We are commanded to do that. We're not bringing heaven on earth. The Messiah is not going to arrive on Air Force One. Jesus is coming to take us to the place that he's been preparing for us. And in the midst of it all, you and I are supposed to be busy about our Father's business. Listen, not your business, not my business, our Father's business. No matter what we're called to do, occupationally, vocationally, as a Christian. I'm only speaking to the Christians right now. Whatever that thing is, are you a school teacher, engineer? Are you a homemaker? Are you an airline pilot? Whatever you do, you are to be doing that to bring food to the table, and what excess you have, use to the advancement of the kingdom of God. It's a means to keep you going, because your first and primary calling is to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's the only hope for California. It's the only thing that's going to stop racism. Rioting, lawlessness is the gospel. Hearts need to be changed. You can implement all the laws you want, and you can do, God help us, you can do what Kamala Harris is talking about by taking away everybody's guns. Seriously? Do you think lawless bad guys are going to listen to that? She'll just take all the guns away from good people. Bad people have never obeyed laws. That's why they're bad people. But you and I live at a time right now where the pulpits are silent when they should be their most vocal, speaking exact truth that meets the culture and the demands that are placed upon our congregants. People will say to me, we're still doing church, we're preaching online services. You're not doing church, you're preaching online services. I can do the same thing by turning on Christian radio. I listen as often as I can to Dr. J. Vernon McGee. There's no difference. You're not having church when you're listening to Christian radio, are you? You can't do church unless you're in church. You can't do church unless you're having to jostle the parking lot and get a spot and walk with brothers and sisters into the building and prefer one another that they might have that seat instead of you. To hear what's going on and to pray with people and lay hands on the sick and pray that God would heal them. You want to flatten the curve in the regard of a pandemic? We have a pandemic of suicide. Last Saturday, we baptized 1,004 people. And the last person I baptized was a little 8-year-old girl. And she explained to me exactly why she needed to be baptized. And she was dead spot on. And I baptized her. Well, the following day, Sunday, last week here at church, the mother told me that little girl at 8 years of age who's been sequestered at home because our California school system, the head of that system said, we're not going to open the public schools in California until after the election. That's on film, that's on video, you can look at it, using it as a political ploy. That little girl ran away from home, the mother told me. She said, I've had such a hard time. I'm so thankful for yesterday. She ran away from home. I said, what'd you say, 8 years old? She ran away from home because she said she missed her friends. She was brokenhearted over her friends. She hadn't seen them in months. And she ran away, and when she was found, she said, I'm looking for my classmates. What does that mean? That little 8-year-old knows how much importance there is to human interaction. And we have pulpits today that have surrendered. Surrendered to what? What is it? What's happened? Why didn't the churches surrender during the time of the bubonic plague? Why didn't the churches surrender in the Spanish flu? Those things make COVID look like a picnic. And we shut down for months. How many people have gone to hell? How many people have not heard the gospel because we've been cowering in fear? What is the church? Reminds me of theologians who never get engaged in people's lives. They just sit in their offices and they decipher theological tweedledees from tweedledums, and they don't know what it's like for someone's life to be ripped apart, and they help them put it back together again. There are pastors that are saying, no, we're not going to open because somebody could get sick. You going to tell that to Jesus on the day of judgment when he said, behold, I've set before you an open door that no man can shut? Do we love God enough to run the risk of getting arrested and being fined? There's churches in California being fined thousands of dollars for being open. Every week, this church gets a notification to close its doors. What are we going to do? We're not essential. Just ask Governor Newsom. We're not non-essential either. We're neither one of those things. We're the church of the living God, the ground and pillar of all truth. We're transcendent. I speak to the pastors of the state of California. You're going to have to throw off the intimidation of your board. You're going to have to throw off the intimidation of the community. But you need, if possible, stand on top of your car or do what you must to preach the gospel and lead people to the doors of your church. Open up the doors of your church just because it's his church, it's not yours. Nobody owns your church that you pastor but Jesus Christ. At least I pray he's the one who owns your church. I do not have the authority to close the doors of this church. If the city, the county, or the state want to close these doors, they have to chain the doors with chains. I want media, I want pictures, and I want heaven to know they closed your doors, but I cannot do it. I don't have that authority, and neither do you. People are dying, people are hurting. Will you trust God enough to encourage your people? If you're sick, stay home. If you have a compromised immune system, stay home. If you're not feeling well, stay home. But on such and such a day, we're going to open up our doors and we're going to worship the Lord God with singing and with study and with praise. Because we are the church of the living God. And right now, the church of the living God, by and large, is hiding like Gideon, terrified and threshing wheat in a hole for fear that the enemy might know. And right now, the church in California has so fallen from her lofty place that few even recognize who she is or where she's at. California's in peril. The answer is not in the State House. The answer is in God's house. And every pulpit in California needs to open up and preach fearlessly, because this is eternal truth. We obeyed the laws. We obeyed Romans 13. We closed our doors when we didn't know what we had. We didn't know if this pandemic was going to be, it sounded like there were going to be dead people strewn on the streets. The U.S. military brought ships on both sides of our coast, one right off of Los Angeles here, waiting for it to be filled up because our hospitals were going to be overwhelmed and overrun. Well, we have a nurse that was on one of those hospital ships here in Los Angeles. Do you know how many people they had in 3 months? 4 people. 4. And none of them stayed longer than 4 days in that hospital ship from COVID. They all went home. Nobody reported that. Did you know that the recovery and survival rate of COVID is better than the common flu right now in America? Did you know that California has 40 million people? And when you look at what is known as the new revised death rate or death number, those that have succumbed to COVID in California, did you know that of all the United States, California is the safest place to be? And did you know this? Did you ever think of this? That the Christian who practices now a different new lifestyle, we don't riot. We're not throwing bricks through buildings. We're not amassing together and huffing and puffing and running down the streets and blowing things up. No, we gather together to pray for our leaders, to pray for our governor and our leaders in California, to pray for your mayors and your city council, to do everything you can to help them. But we gather together because we have a different lifestyle now. Think of it. The Christian following Jesus has the healthiest lifestyle known. We're not compromised. But you know what? I'll leave you with this. We obeyed the president, and we obeyed for a few weeks the governor. But when it became clear to me that the experts didn't know what they were talking about, and no one in authority in our state would give us an answer regarding where they placed the church. If our governor would have said, let's kick it down to June 15th, hypothetically, I would have said, okay, I submit to your lead. God, it's on you. We couldn't even get a date. And in a time of prayer, studying the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, because those are 2 books about reopening, you know. God spoke to my heart on April 26th. and made it so radically clear to open up the church and to invite other pulpits in California to open up on May 31st. And we opened up. And 1,000 other churches followed suit. What if, one more time, what if God in his grace and in his mercy gave one more call to the pulpits of America? What if God were to say, open up your church, all of you, my children, all of you, my family, all of you, my pulpits, open up the church on thus and thus day in America? What would happen? I tell you what will happen. I tell you what will happen. God's men will arise. They may be trembling. They may have a dry mouth before battle. Their arm may be shaking. But they will be constrained by the power of God to get up and to obey God rather than man. They will get up to preach life. They will get up to preach salvation. They will get up to preach light in this hour of darkness. Those who do not open up, it may be well that they never open up. But that window of opportunity is closing to the American pulpit. Can we not see this is the hour of great testing, and all that we've invested in knowing the Bible has now come to the time of testing. We're being graded now. This is the test. And we're failing. We have talked about revival. Revival will not come unless there's repentance and we turn our hearts to righteousness. America's pulpits are silent today, this afternoon, because pastors have lost their voice. Never again, tens of thousands of American pastors will never again be able to preach a sermon on faith. No one will listen to them. Never again will a pastor get up and do a series on being courageous. No one will listen to them. Never again will a pastor get up and preach a message on trusting God. No one will listen to them anymore, because they have nothing to say, because they didn't live what they preached. We need to be convicted, we need to repent, and we need to, under our watch, do everything we can to have California come back to its historic roots, where God was preached up and down the state of California, in mission stations, in revivals, from Azusa Street to the Jesus movement. It can happen again. But this time, we need to make sure our culture is resurrected with us. Father, we thank you for the impact of this week. We pray that you would take each and every speaker, and Lord, that you would catapult their story, their message, their exhortation, their information in so many different directions. We pray that you would take this offering that we have all put up today and that you would use it. Lord, please, it's as though we have a couple of fish and some bread. Will you make a feast of this? Will you make it something that will nourish the soul, challenge the heart, and cause people to be engaged for what is good and right? Until we see you face to face, come, Jesus, come. Until you do, may we be busy about your business. In Jesus' name, and may all God's people say, amen. God bless you, and thank you for joining us. And I think Don Dix, somebody, or am I closing it out? God bless you guys.